How are you guys doing? Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Please let me know in the comments where you guys are tuning in from. I already see some of you were dropping your cities and countries in there. Look, we got Netherlands, Ireland, Serbia, Arizona, Brazil. Hold on, I'm scrolling through the comments. Here it comes, here it comes. Slovenia, Munich, North London, we got Ireland, Bangladesh, Chicago, Dublin, California, Pretoria, France, Washington, Peshawar, Toronto, Somalia, Norway, Chicago, Neptune, Netherlands, Montreal, Romania, Bangladesh, Sarajevo, Toronto, Cyprus, Denmark, New York City, New Jersey, Austria, Estonia, Serbia, England. Wow. Amazing, amazing. Look, it keeps going. Make sure you guys have hit the like button. I see most of you have actually pressed the thumbs up and the like button, so I appreciate that very much. Sorry, I'm trying to move my coffee out the way. Yeah, so please make sure you've hit the like button. We're going to jump right into it, okay? I've got some really astonishing crap, you know. I mean, it's always astonishing, but this thing is something else. I thought we can begin with this, okay? So give me one moment to put this up on the screen, and okay. Excuse me. So I just want to show you how frankly disgusting some of the sentences that are being handed out in France, okay? I mean, this is really embarrassing, and it's disgusting the way that some people are being treated in the courts right now in France, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to ram and cram as many people as possible through the system, you know, put them in prison. And it's for crimes that are, I mean, they're hardly criminal to begin with, okay? And I just, it's not just that, it's not just the harsh sentences, it's how the judges, when it comes to rich kids who've committed the exact same crime, they give them a pass, but when it comes to kids that come from a poor area in France, they get crapped on for, like in a way that you cannot believe. They humiliate them. The judges humiliate them. I'm going to read you some of the transcripts because I've spent days reading these transcripts, and I already did a video last time about these insane sentences, but I want to go through this again because there are hundreds of cases in the span of a couple of days, right? You've had hundreds of people that are already in prison now because of these riots in France. So I just want to show you something here. This person on Twitter basically put, you know, side by side and made a comparison of how, you know, as I said, the rich kids are treated and then the poor kids. One of these kids from a rich area, he said, quote, "I drink more alcohol than water." And he also said he smokes 20 joints a day, okay? And so that was not used against him. No. That was used, you know, this context that was provided, you know, the judge used that as you know, essential background to give this person a pass. Like, oh, you know, they're troubled and they're having issues getting on and so on. And you know, I'm going to give them a break. Okay, so you have 5 rich kids here. It says, I'm translating for you. It says 5 rich kids here who said that they were seduced by, you know, all of the stuff that was being posted on Snapchat, and they just wanted to go and cause trouble. Okay, and they say, "I'm sorry, it wasn't my intention." You know, this guy called Ashil said, "It wasn't my intention to commit any crimes or do anything delinquent, and I only went there to look. I was just looking." Now, here's the thing. There are other people who've been sent to prison now, also for just looking, okay? In one case, somebody said, I went out, je suis allé manger un grec. It basically, it means they went to get Greek food, right? They went out to buy some food, okay? Doesn't matter. The judge in that case said, "Are you crazy? Why are you going out to eat when there are riots happening? I don't believe you." Prison, straight to prison. Okay? Another person who was wearing a mask, just for wearing a mask, prison. Just for wearing a mask. I mean, this is insane, right? This is really insane. This is where he says here, "I drink more alcohol than water, and I smoke 20 joints a day." And yeah, you know, no problem. They were also wearing masks, and they were also, trying to conceal their identities. It's okay. You get a pass because you come from a rich district. You come from a nice background. So you get a pass. And I think this is very interesting because it's a one-to-one comparison. You know, apples and apples. You've got people in the same country of the same age committing the same crimes, but one group gets a pass just because they come from a better background. That is taken into account. And I want to show you the kind of humiliation that people are subjected to. So there's one kid who he's blind up to 80% in one eye. Okay, so that's what it says here. These are some of the transcripts. Okay, and the judge humiliates him because he asked the judge to repeat the questions he couldn't hear, and the judge says, Are you also deaf in addition to being blind? That's what the judge told this person. Making fun of their physical handicap. I don't see what that has to do with being guilty or not guilty of rioting. Someone has a handicap. It's just humiliating him. And then the judge said, "Your intellectual, basically your stupidity, your stupidity warrants a harsh sentence." Okay. So it says, "Votre faiblesse intellectuelle," your basically your weak mind, your feeble mind, necessitates, right? It warrants, it needs a good or harsh punishment. This is a quote from the judge. Again, I don't know what this is supposed to do except humiliate someone, you know. And then this guy's parents, they basically work. It says here they're I think one of them's a nurse and the other one works as a medic. And they started like yelling out in the courtroom, like, "Is this French justice? You give my kid 6 months. My blind kid gets 6 months in prison for burning a trash can." I mean, look, I admit burning a trash can is not cool. First of all, it stinks. And second of all, this is just, it's stupid. Okay. I'm not going to say it's okay, but this is kind of insane. If you're gonna say this is delinquent behavior and someone should be thrown in jail because they burnt a trash can and it belongs to everybody, it's public property, fine. But what's up with the humiliation? Why do you have to tell this person, make fun of this person being blind and not hearing your questions, or say that you're so stupid that you really need to be sent to jail to learn a lesson? I don't understand this humiliation. This is one case, by the way, right? So I'm just kind of. There are so many of these cases. I told you hundreds of cases. They're open till 2 a.m. These courts, 1 or 2 a.m. Okay, all over the country, just ramming these people, cramming them. Here's another person. This is a kid who went out to in their Crocs. Okay, who's just going to the supermarket, like to a like a corner shop, right? A corner shop, and because he was running away, he ran away from the police at the sight of what was happening with the police, beating the crap out of everybody, firing these flash balls that can kill. He ran away, okay? And that was enough. That was it. That was it. Yeah, so he's a young delivery driver here, hit by a flashball, and the judge. So this person, after being injured by a flashball, which, remember, this killed someone in Marseille the other day, right? someone called Muhammad, and the judge said, why didn't you go home? Why didn't you hide at home after you were hit by a flashball? I mean, I'm pretty sure you should go to the hospital after being hit by a flashball, number one. But I don't see how this is proof of criminal behavior. And then they convicted this person of violence against the police, of committing violent acts against the police. You know, this is like a medieval courtroom. It's like watching something from, I don't know, like the 14th century or something. It's so the punishments are so harsh without any proof, right? And even, let's say, you know, these people are absolutely guilty of everything they did. One of them burned a trash can, like we just saw. You know, this guy apparently didn't go home fast enough and is guilty of violence against the police. This is disproportionate. You know, you know, the French, they like to show off by saying, oh, this is, you know, their country is a country of enlightenment, right? Les Lumières. And you know, le pays des droits du citoyen et de l'homme, okay? So, I mean, all of these revolutionary things, no pun intended, that the French have brought to Europe, right, which they like to show off on, this is a gross contradiction. You know, it's like a complete opposite of everything that the French claim to stand for, right? And it's so disproportionate, really disgusting. I mean, you, like I told you the other day, you have people who are in court, they get 15 minutes in court, then straight to prison, right? Some people said that they had the police spitting in their food and water, so they couldn't even eat while they were waiting to be tried. And that, you know, I think one parent here was saying his child didn't eat for 4 days because he was waiting for his court date. It's really insane. One judge here was making fun of another person. Says, "What do you do all day? Do you just smoke? You just smoke shit and play on the PlayStation?" I mean, in French, that basically means hash, right? So we smoke weed, right? But I must admit, right? It's very crass. It's very vulgar language for a judge, right? If you spoke like that to the judge, they put you in contempt of court. But the judge is like making fun of people in this case, right? Do you just smoke weed all day? But again, it sounds much more vulgar in French. I mean, but of course, you know, the rich kids, they got off scot-free. There's one guy who's studying to become an electrician. You know, he's doing an apprenticeship, 18 months in prison, because here. "18 months in prison." And the thing is that he just fit the profile of being black. So the police said that that they were chasing someone who was African, and they just happened to catch this guy. And it's his word against theirs. Do you understand? So in many cases, there's another case with 3 people who are arrested, and they don't know each other. These 3 people, okay? They're in their 20s, and they were all sent to prison. One of them, the police accused of having stolen his some kind of jewelry. I don't know, some piece of jewelry. And the policeman said it's worth 500 euros. And actually, again, there's no proof of this. There's no CCTV footage. There are no witnesses. It's just the police's word against the suspect, right? And not only does this suspect go to prison, he also has to pay the policeman 1,000 euros, so double of you know, whatever this piece of jewelry costs, which they cannot find. I mean, again, this is like, it's not even the worst one. I told you the other day, there's somebody who was sent to prison for a can of Red Bull. 10 months in prison for stealing a can of Red Bull. There's another one, but don't quote me on this. Because I only just read it a few moments ago. I was trying to find the source. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is true, which kind of proves my point here. Somebody went into prison for having stolen 50 cents. 50 cents, right? Again, the fact that this doesn't surprise me, even though I'm not sure it's 100% true, it really underscores everything that's happening here, because the everything else that I've told you, this is true. These are the court transcripts. You know, it's so humiliating. And you know, the French police today, they banned a demonstration. Okay, so there's a yearly demonstration, a protest that takes place because of another victim of the police. Okay, so his name is Adama Traoré. He was a guy in his 20s, and very, very shady. So basically 7 years ago, the police killed him. They arrested him. 2 hours later, he was dead. And all three policemen changed their accounts of what happened multiple times. I think 3 times in the course of 2 years. Okay, and none of them match. Okay, so you take the witness statement. Okay, the official statement from one of these police. It doesn't match with the other guys or the third guys. All of these 3 statements are conflicting every time they change them on top of it. Okay, so you have like 9 statements here and none of them match, which is already shady in and of itself. Here's the other thing. When his mother, so this is the mother of Adama Traoré, and his brother, they went to the police station to ask where the hell he is. They would not tell his mother where he was. And they spent the whole night in front of the police station, just waiting and waiting for the police station to open, because they told them you have to get out. Visiting hours are over. You know, I mean, what visiting hours? They're trying to find out if the guy's alive or dead, and they won't tell them. And then finally, you know, I think the brother, he gets in the way of a police car and he starts causing a ruckus, and then they take him inside, and then it turns out they killed him. Right? They killed him. They tell them that your brother's dead. And they lied about it. They said that he died from alcohol and cannabis consumption. And then they wouldn't hand over the body, and the family wouldn't accept it, actually, because they wanted to get a second autopsy. And then the second autopsy comes out, and sure enough, he died from asphyxiation. They choked this guy to death. He died. And I don't need to tell you that they put their knees on him. They, you know, just horrific stuff. Horrific. Three people, 3 grown men attacking this guy, and they killed him, and they tried to hide it from the family, and they lied about why he died. And then they tear gassed the family. They tear gassed other people who came to protest just peacefully in front of the police station. I mean, it's such a scandal. It's almost it's just as bad as this killing with Nael, if not worse. You know, it's this constant brutality, the lying. It's so medieval. The only way I can describe it, it's medieval, you know. And today's the 7th year. So keep in mind, they killed this guy on his birthday. He died on his birthday. And you know, today there's supposed to be a protest, and the police banned it because they said that given the context of the riots, they cannot allow this protest to go ahead, which is ridiculous. And it did go ahead, and you have tons of French MPs or parliamentarians, representatives who showed up. And I just want you to understand this. This is today. The police attacked Adama Traoré's brother. So this protest today is for Adama Traoré, and on the day of the protest, they attack his brother and put him in the same position. And on top of it, they also start slapping around women and journalists. I mean, the video speaks for itself. Look at this.
Travaille, monsieur, travaille.
You see him? That's exactly how they killed his brother 7 years ago on this day.
S'il vous plaît, pas cette équipe-là, pas à 3 sur son dos. S'il vous plaît, pas à 3 sur son dos. S'il vous plaît.
There's one of the women is saying, pas de poids sur son dos, s'il vous plaît. Like, don't put any weight on his back. You know, it's just very polite. And then start pushing him and shoving him.
Laissez-le juste respirer.
Just let him breathe, she says. Just let him breathe.
Il a frappé un collègue, il a interpellé pour ça.
Il n'y a pas de problème. C'est pas la même, c'est pas ce que je dis. Pas à toi, moi je bouge pas.
Recule.
Tu crois que tu fais peur à qui?
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
Oui, qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Je te demande de pas être à toi.
Oh, reculez là. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
Right, and now they start attacking journalists who are filming.
Reculez! Reculez! Allez!
Oh, les journalistes! Les journalistes! C'est un journaliste! 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 Bordel de merde! C'est un journaliste! Oh! Monsieur, c'est un journaliste!
Arrête! Calmez-vous! Calmez-vous! S'il vous plaît! Monsieur!
Oh, derrière toi!
Arrêtez là! C'est bon! Allez, gars! Arrêtez!
Voilà.
Le pays des droits de l'homme et du citoyen. Doesn't really look like it. Not a lot of human rights or citizens' rights there. I mean, this I really don't care what anyone says. There's no excuse for this. It's so brutal. It's so excessive and unnecessary. Why would you physically exhaust yourself, and go to such lengths just like put some man in a t-shirt on the floor like that? What is the point of this? And then you saw they pushed that woman on the floor like that, like you know, it's disgusting. I mean, this is disgusting, really. You know, that, and the irony is so bad. It's very, very bad. They treating him like they you know, if they were in a room alone in an apartment, like in the case of his brother, he might be dead. Who the hell knows? Maybe he's lucky that it happened. He should be thankful that it happened in broad daylight, where they might have killed him. You know, this is I think this is why people are rioting. It's not the only reason. There are economic reasons behind it. I told you there's a decades-old racial divide and an economic and social divide. Okay, this class segregation. And once again, you see not just in people's day-to-day lives, but in the courtrooms. I'm reading the transcripts, and I'm telling you that they are letting rich kids, you know, get off scot-free, even when they tell the judge, I am intoxicated, I drink more alcohol than water, I smoke 20 joints a day, I'm out of my mind, and I went to commit violence in the streets, I rioted in the streets, I vandalized, I was also masked, and no, it's okay, you get off scot-free because you have a different name, and you come from a nicer area in Paris or a nicer town. That's scandalous. Then you're no longer dealing with punishing people because they committed a crime. Now you're just punishing people because they have the wrong name or the wrong address, and that's not a courtroom or a court of law. It's a kangaroo court, and I think it's scandalous because, you know, France is a lovely country. It has it can be beautiful, and it is beautiful in many ways. This is not one of them. I think this is scandalous, and it's if you're shocked by the level of destruction from the riots and all these things, you should be more shocked by this, because this is the spark that set off everything. And it's not the first time. You have to remember that the biggest riots were in 2005. Why? Because once again, the police harassed two young boys, 15 and 17. They went to hide in next to a transformer, and they were electrocuted to death. Right? And then you had the biggest riots in 40 years with a zero. Okay? People went nuts because this is excessive. And then last year, you have 13 people that are shot dead by the police, that are killed by the police because they refused to comply, whatever that means. We can all have our own interpretation. Wonderful. Now two people, including Nael, who have been killed. Actually, no, make that three, because as I told you, in Marseille, they killed Mohamed with a flashball. I mean, it's like, it's too much to count. It's getting out of hand. It's out of control. And I wanted to show you this because it's so scandalous. It's honestly scandalous. And Macron, his neoliberal cronies and the right, they like to say that they're the real Republicans. They're the real French, and they are true to French values. Really? These don't look like the stated French values, right? The stated ones. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if you won't believe your eyes, if you won't believe the court transcripts, and you won't believe the video I just showed you, which is just one of a gazillion videos, I don't know what to tell you. This is not like a problem that's exclusive to France. It's not exclusive to France. You have this problem in other countries, but it needs to be called out because it's disgusting, and you cannot treat people like this. You cannot treat women like that. You cannot treat journalists like that. You can't treat anybody like that. If you're stopping, I don't know, somebody with a machine gun, or somebody who's just killed a bunch of people, fine. That this is a different story. That's somebody who's actually violent, who's out of control. These are not violent people. The ones I just showed you in the video, they were doing nothing wrong. The video that started the riots in France with Nael, they claimed that he rammed them. They lied, and that's why the riot started. And they get away with this. How many other people were killed or brutalized by the police, and the police got away with it because no one was there to film it, and there wasn't a video. It's really insane. And like I told you, right now in the French courts, you have people who have been sent to prison just because the policeman who arrested them claims they did something, but there is no evidence. You cannot convict someone of a crime when you don't have evidence, right? And you have to understand, in most countries, judges are always going to take the policeman's word over the defendant. In most cases, right? That's true, and that's wrong, because if you are a proper court of law, then you should take into account evidence, right? You cannot just randomly throw people in jail for months or years at a time because somebody said something or claimed something. This is insane. This is insane, and it's insanity. And I think it's really shambolic. It's really bad, really, really bad. This is not going to go away. I know Macron wants to kind of bury this and sweep this under the rug. It's not going to go away. You have to keep in mind that the reason that they don't want to fix these problems in France, and especially reform this 2017 law where they can kill you, the police can kill you if you refuse to comply, which is again open to interpretation. The reason they don't want to reform this is because the French interior minister and the French president are beholden to the police unions. The police unions have too much power. Do you understand? the protests that have been happening in France for the last couple of years, whether it's the yellow vests or the anti-mandate, anti-passport ones in 2021, and the pension reforms. So, because you've had tons of protests these last years, right? Every single time, how do they crush these protests? With the police. Macron needs to please the police unions and be, and curry favor with them, because he needs them as a tool to crush dissent, to crush the protests. And he gets a lot of protests, as I just listed a few examples. Okay, and not to mention the ones happening right now. Okay, these are 4 different, episodes of great unrest, protesting, rioting, whatever the hell you want to call it. Doesn't matter. The point is that Macron is not popular. He needs the police, and he needs to remain on their, on their good side. And if he now starts telling them to, cut the crap and dial it back, and and he starts criticizing them, and he already did, by the way, after the video came out, because he had no choice. You have a video of a guy shooting a kid. I mean, the fact that he said it's inexcusable, already made a lot of people angry and was out of character. And I told you that it's unheard of that he or the interior minister ever criticized the police, but he did, and that's all he's going to do. He's not going to do anything, and he's not going to do anything else. He's not going to rein them in and tell them to dial it back, because next time there are protests, they might not come to help to rescue him, to save him, right? But again, I guarantee you there are going to be more of these insane sentences. There are going to be more of these, videos. But I wanted to bring you up to date on this for the moment, okay? Go check out the other ones that I made, because I've done tons of videos now on the riots. And I appreciate your support, by the way. Some of you were sending me some donations on PayPal and thanking me for the coverage of what's happening in France, and I greatly appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so, since we're dealing with the baguette people, since we're dealing with the people of the baguette, give me a second to kind of go through this before we get to the other ones, okay? Here we go. Okay. How many people we got? How many people watching right now? Let's see. Lovely. We've got 600 people watching. Please make sure that you've hit the like button, and I appreciate that. Big Basil is saying the snail eaters. Do you know I was tricked once into eating snails by some French people? God, disgusting. And the second time I was forced. I mean, it wasn't Guantanamo Bay, but still, I was... God, that was horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. Never forgiving them for that. Anyway. Hold on, we got a super chat here. This is from Pradesh. Thank you, Pradesh. It says, Richie Michi Ditchy. How are we, my brethren in Christ? Sorry I missed your streams lately. I've been very busy, but yes, I am back. Well, it's good to see you, and I do hope you catch up on them and watch the other streams, because I've been doing streams almost every 2 days, and that's how it's going to be and how it is. Just 1 second before I continue. There's been another donation. I think I missed that. Thank you first again to Pradesh, and thank you to Nicole. Bonjour, c'est Véro. Merci pour la super analyse sur la France, comme toujours. What happens here terrifies me. Much love. I was so hoping. J'avais espéré que tu viennes voir le stream maintenant. Donc ça fait plaisir de te voir, et j'ai retrouvé ton compte sur Twitter. Donc c'est c'est hallucinant, hallucinant. Thank you very much, Véro. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's continue. I have something else that is absolutely insane. I think you guys are going to be shocked. So French lawmakers have passed a bill that allows the police to spy on French citizens by hacking their phones and turning on GPS, a microphone, camera. It's been compared to, the Patriot Act in the US, and similar laws that you have in the UK and in Europe. But I mean, the fact that everyone is distracted now in France by the riots, by the protests, by the killing of Nael by the police. They've been very lucky, Macron's government, because, like I said, everyone's distracted and not paying attention, and now they've got this bill through. And I've been, researching this and compiling all this information. I put a thread on Twitter, and I want to walk you through this and how insane this law is. It's completely out of control. Completely out of control. So it's particularly Article 3 under this justice reform. Okay. And so here's my thread that I put on Twitter. The bill passed with 80 votes in favor and 24 against. So you can take a guess who voted against it. It was, of course, the left. Okay, so you have a coalition called NUPES, NUPES, and you have the French party, La France Insoumise, LFI or LFI. They're the ones who said, "What the hell are you guys doing? This is an authoritarian's snooper's charter. It's out of control. This is unnecessary. It does not work, and it's a violation of people's privacy." And the people who voted for it are, of course, Macron, right, and his party, and so alongside him, Marine Le Pen's party, Rassemblement National, right? So the far right, center right, and the center, they love this thing. As a matter of fact, it's Macron's own justice minister. He is the one who introduced this bill. Okay, so now, as I said, the police, they can track someone's location in real time, and they can turn on cameras and microphones to record conversations. On paper, they say that this has to be approved by a judge or a magistrate, and it's valid for just 15 days, but it can be renewed for another 15 days. And after that, you can renew it for 2 months at a time, up to 6 months in total. Okay, so you can survey a target for 6 months in total. Okay, now this is aimed at people who are suspected of terrorism or organized crime, right? So you gotta love it. Terrorism. You guys know that the Terrorism Act in the UK, okay, or the Patriot Act in the United States, these things are notorious for having been abused against the general population, right? So they're not actually going to fight terrorism with this. They're going to use it to attack who knows who, God knows who. And then it'll come out in a few years that actually they've been spying on everybody. Just same thing like with Snowden, GCHQ in England, which is the NSA equivalent, spying on everybody. Helping the NSA in America to spy on everybody, spy on the entire population and the whole world. So when you hear anti-terrorism or, fighting organized crime, well, what does that even mean? So under the law, French police can spy on a target suspected of committing a crime punishable by at least 5 years in prison. Okay, so that's the threshold. The target, whoever you're spying on, the crime that you suspect them of committing, it has to carry a penalty of minimum 5 years in jail. Now, they tried introducing an amendment in the Senate. So in France, they have the National Assembly, and then it goes to the Senate, and then back down to the National Assembly. So in the Senate, they said, no, let's raise it to 10 years. So you can only spy on someone if they're committing a much more serious crime, something that is minimum 10 years in prison, not 5. And then this amendment didn't make it in the end. It was kept at 5. Now, the Justice Minister, Éric Dupond-Moretti, there's his name, he claims, and of course he's gonna exaggerate and lie in his favor because it's his bill. He claims that it's just going to be a few dozen cases per year. Scout's honor, cross my heart and hope to die. I don't know why I did a V sign. Yeah, he claims it's just a few dozen cases per year, we promise. And then he says, this is very different from totalitarianism, and it's not George Orwell's 1984. Okay, so whenever somebody says, this is not 1984, I can guarantee you it's 1984, and probably worse. And it is. So he was complaining that it's too risky and it's unreliable to bug somebody's apartment, the old-fashioned way where you break in, you put some bugs in the lamps, in a lampshade, or in the old school fixed lines, It's too messy. And he said, why should we deprive ourselves of these new technologies? He sounds like Boromir, right? He sounds like Boromir in Lord of the Rings when he sees the ring in Rivendell, and he's like, why shouldn't we use it? Let us use Sauron's ring against him. That's what this guy sounds like, you know? So the point is that they haven't even had time to debate this thing, right? And just to be clear, this was not introduced after the riots started. But my point still stands that most people in France have no clue about this. No clue. They're distracted by the protests, by the riots. And now was, the perfect time to just kind of rush this thing through and get it over with. So they've had barely any time to debate this. And because of the riots, the parliamentary sessions are shortened, right? Because every representative has to go scramble back to their constituency. They're running around the country. They're even busier than they were before. So, very convenient. And of course, the right in France, the right wing, they say that, well, look at the protests, look at these savages, what they're doing to the country. Oh, this is proof that we need the spying bill. Okay, I mean, burning a trash can is not exactly organized crime or terrorism. Stealing cheese or a can of Red Bull, not really terrorism, is it? But okay, you do your thing. So, I noted here that the terrorists who carried out the 2015 Paris attacks, guess what? They didn't use any special devices or sophisticated means to communicate. They used SMS, just regular SMS, text messages, right? And these things are notorious for being insecure, unencrypted. Anybody can intercept them. I mean, you have to understand the police have something called a Stingray, right? It fits in a suitcase. They can park outside, open this thing up, and this Stingray pretends to be a cell phone tower. And then, your phone just locks onto it and thinks it's a cell phone tower. And then they can listen to your calls. They can see who you're calling, when you called them. They can read the text messages, everything, right? So they already have the technology to survey the likes of the terrorists who carried out, one of the worst terrorist attacks in French history. So that shows you that, all these lies and pretexts and excuses that they offer you that, we need this spy bill to fight terrorists. If we don't do this, if we can't turn on your microphones, they're going to fly a baguette through the Eiffel Tower. This is insane. This is a lie and it's ridiculous. They do not need these things. This does nothing but invade people's privacy. Okay? This goes without saying also, but others have pointed out that guess what? More wary terrorists or hardened criminals and gangs probably not even using cell phones or devices that have microphones and cameras in the first place. So what exactly do you gain from this, right? Keep in mind, in case this wasn't clear enough, this is not just about phones. This is every single electronic device, right? They can hack your goddamn car if they want. The car, right? Your tablet, phone, computer, everything, right? So there was one amendment that did succeed, and it added doctors and journalists to the list of protected professions that cannot be spied on, okay? So there's a clause in this bill that says the police are not allowed to spy on lawyers, on judges, on lawmakers, and then they added doctors and journalists, which sounds great, right? Which sounds great. Now, here's the thing. The left tried introducing another amendment that adds journalists who don't hold press cards. Not every journalist necessarily has a press card, right? So, because that they're going to try and screw this, right? You know that they were going to spy on a journalist and say, well, he didn't have a press card, so, fair game. I doubt they're going to follow any of this, right? I guarantee you, I bet you anything you like, in a few years, there's going to be a scandal because it turns out the police were spying on a judge, and they were spying on a lawyer, and they were spying on an MP, they were spying on a journalist, and every single profession on this list, they will spy on them. There's nobody to monitor and verify any of this anyway. Who polices the police? L'IGPN, right? L'inspecteur général de la police nationale. They usually side with the police, by the way. And also keep in mind that these things can be classified. So once again, if you don't have the necessary clearance, there's no guarantee of oversight in any way whatsoever. So it sounds nice on paper. Oh, fighting terrorists. Oh. Yeah, and how do we make sure that you're actually fighting terrorists? Just to give you a recent example, right? Because the law might say something nice, but that doesn't mean that it's actually applied. The most recent example, the riots. Why are people rioting in France? People are rioting because the police lied. The police claimed the police hid behind a 2017 law that allows them to kill people who refuse to comply and pose a threat to the police and to others around them. They claimed that Naël tried to ram them with a car, and they got away with it. And then when the video came out contradicting the police's statement, then people started rioting because the police lied and did not apply the law. So you have no guarantee, right before your eyes, there's an example of this. You have no guarantee that the French police are going to apply the law, even if it says, it says something nice. No guarantee whatsoever. So this raises the question, how will the police be able to remotely turn on someone's microphone, camera, and GPS, right? Because the way that they word it makes it sound like, they have the power to do this already, and it just takes a flick of a switch. Yeah, they do. They do. And the first way that they're going to do this, they will exploit 0 days. So a 0 day is, a 0 day, it basically means any security vulnerability in a device, in a piece of software or an app that hasn't been discovered nor patched or fixed, right? So, there might be a security vulnerability on an iPhone that even people at Apple don't know about, but as an intelligence agency or somebody else discovers this vulnerability and they exploit it. Okay, so that's the general definition. Okay, so this is the first way that they will do this, and we know from Vault 7, that the CIA hoard 0 days. That means that they spend the entire day looking for errors, looking for mistakes, looking for bad code, looking for any hole, right, that already exists in a piece of software or in a piece of hardware, and then they just they use it whenever they want, and the user and the manufacturer are none the wiser. They have hundreds of these things, right? So that's the first way. The second way, Pegasus. I guarantee you, once again, the French police, if they haven't already bought Pegasus, and I would be surprised, they will get this and they will use it to spy on people. Okay, Pegasus is again, just to remind you, is a it's a cyber weapon. It's a cyber weapon. It's a tool that hacks mobile phones, notably iPhones and iOS, and it's manufactured by NSO Group, which is an Israeli company in Israel, and I've done videos about this before, so please feel free to check them out. Just briefly, there's a pipeline in Israel between Unit 8200, or if you will, the Israeli military, and the private sector. So you have people who leave the Israeli army and go to start up these companies that export cyber weapons like Pegasus. And of course, you have to understand something that this is a way for Israel to make money, but it still has the possibility to distance itself in case anything goes wrong, as we saw, right? So Jamal Khashoggi, who's a journalist who worked at the Washington Post, he was killed in part because of Pegasus. The Saudis bought this tool and they used it to track his movements and his location in real time, and they killed him, right? So another, one of Gonzalo Boye, the lawyer that I interviewed just a few weeks ago, guess what? There's a scandal in Spain last year that it turns out his iPhone was hacked, and a bunch of other judges and lawyers in Spain had their iPhones hacked with Pegasus, right? So this is a notorious tool that is, we only hear about Pegasus being used against journalists and MPs and lawmakers. And it's also marketed originally as an anti-terrorism gadget. Okay, so Israel and NSO groups say we only allow exports of this cyber weapon for other countries and states so they can combat organized crime and terrorism. But the only thing we actually see in reality is that they don't use this against terrorists or criminals. They use it against journalists, MPs, lawyers, judges, etc. That's the truth. So I guarantee you the French are going to buy this tool and they will abuse it just in the same way that it has been abused around the world in Mexico and Spain by the Saudis. This is a very, very serious thing. And there's an entire domain and sector of cyber weaponry, okay, electronic warfare. Although, again, I don't think we should... remember, electronic warfare can also refer to jamming systems in a battlefield. So, I don't want to conflate the two, but they are related. And this is an entire domain that people don't even see because you can't really visualize it, but it's there and it's happening. Okay, so don't believe them. I don't believe them for 1 second that they are going to abide by the law. And this is an insanely disgusting piece of legislation. The idea that, you're just supposed to blindly trust the French government to use this responsibly, when you can see in front of you right now the police abusing their power, abusing their authority to whack people, quite literally, and in the mob sense of the term with Nayel, they actually whacked him and killed him. And when you have a precedent in Britain, you have a precedent in the United States of governments passing legislation like this, and in the end, they don't use it to fight terrorists. Terrorists don't even use devices that necessarily have microphones, cameras, or GPS. They use unencrypted means sometimes to communicate, which they can already hack easily and intercept easily. So they don't even need these laws, but they pass them anyway. They exploit the fear that has been instilled in the population, in the wake of 9/11. Perfect timing to pass the Patriot Act. And of course, George Bush and I should say Dick Cheney and his lawyer David Addington, in secret, not even 24 hours after the towers came down, they passed the presidential surveillance program, which then became the NSA mass surveillance that you've all heard of from Greenwald and Snowden in 2013, right? That was the precursor. So again, you have over and over and over and over cases of governments abusing anti-terrorism tools and laws to hurt people who are not terrorists, who are not engaged in organized crime, and who are journalists, lawyers, etc., and just the general population. Everybody. So this is scandalous. And once again, I go back to what I said a few moments ago. The French and their image of, it's the country of, les droits de l'homme et du citoyen, right? Country of human rights, the citizens' rights, right? The country of enlightenment. There's nothing enlightened about this. It's actually very medieval. It's very, very draconian. It's completely, it's something, you would see in 1984 and then some. 1984 and then some. Make no mistake about it. This is scandalous. I've read the law and there is no way you can look at this and find anything nice in it. And by the way, this is just Article 3 of the entire reform. Just in case you didn't know, the Justice Minister, right? Who, by the way, he said that in the light of these riots, he wants a swift and harsh and systematic response. To punish people, and that's happening, right? As we looked at with these ridiculous, absurd, obscene sentences that are really something out of the Middle Ages. He is also asking for 10,000 extra recruits. So 1,250 of those will be for the Ministry of Justice, and the rest of them police. And he also wants to raise the annual budget from 9.6 billion to 11 billion. Right? So he's really getting a lot, right? He's getting everything he wants. And surprise, surprise, Macron, Le Pen, No difference between them. The only people who had guts, the only people who have brains and who had the spine to stand up to this are the left, the real left. You know, in France, you have an actual left, a traditional left, Mélenchon, France Insoumise, NUPES, and so on. The only ones, right? I think you had only one single person from Macron's party that objected to this, but you know, the overwhelming majority of the center and the right voted for this, which really says, it tells you everything you need to know. France has officially become a police state. It was already a police state, but in case you had any, you know, you had any doubts or misconception about what's happening, it's a police state. It's official. It's a police state. Outrageous. Truly outrageous. Thank you, Kapapa, for the super chat. I appreciate that very much. And again, for those of you who signed up on Patreon, thank you for that. We have, hold on, give me a second. We have Sant, who just signed up on Patreon. Thank you so much. And we have Pete and AJ and Carrie and Joe. Thank you guys so much. I'm working on a new crab dance because of the copyright issues, so you'll have to forgive me. I can't play one just yet. And we also have Cyborg Ninja, who's just joined as a member on YouTube. So I appreciate that very much. Let me continue with the with what we have over here. Let me get to the cluster bombs, which is okay. So Joe Biden has just decided to send Ukraine cluster bombs. These are some of the most horrific weapons ever invented. It's banned in most countries, and I want to walk you through what's happening and how these things work. So I put together a thread on Twitter, and you can see from this animation, it's basically a giant capsule that contains tiny bomblets, or, you know, miniature bombs, and it's so indiscriminate in the way that it kills and injures, because this thing is spread out over, I mean, you know, for my American viewers, right, which is most of you, it's think of several football fields, right, American football fields. That's how far-reaching and how you know, how indiscriminate these things are. So, okay, so just one of them can spread out these mini bomblets over multiple acres, and you have millions of these things, millions of cluster bombs that are still unexploded and undetonated in Yugoslavia, in Iraq, in Laos, in Cambodia, in Vietnam. You have people to this day who are being maimed, who are losing their arms, losing their legs, losing their sight, losing their lives, because they discover cluster bombs by accident. And I want to be very clear, most casualties of cluster bombs are civilians. 94% of cluster bomb casualties are civilians. 40% are children. So there is no excuse or explanation that justifies sending these weapons. And, you know, just to be clear from the very beginning, the Russians use these as well and have already used these. Both Ukraine and Russia have already, you know, they've been using these things since the start of the war. And I condemn both of them, and I think it's scandalous that Russia uses them. I think it's scandalous that Ukraine uses them. These cluster bombs are notorious for maiming children in Iraq. That's actually how I the first time I ever heard of a cluster bomb was that the United States spread them all, spread them out all over Iraq and just maiming children. You know, utterly scandalous. So I put together a thread here, okay, and I'll read it to you in a second. I just want to show you. Okay. So cluster bombs have a high dud rate, okay? A dud is basically something that fails to go off or fails to detonate, okay? So in addition to just being spread out all over the place, they don't work. They don't even explode, okay? So like I said, this means that, you know, you have farmers who are just doing their work 40 years later, and I was literally watching from Journeyman. They were filming in Laos. Some poor bastard lost both his arms and his sight, just doing his job, just farming. Why? Because the United States dropped cluster bombs there. This is 40 years after the Vietnam War ended. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how bad that is? So, you know, a dud rate is basically how, you know, the percentage of failed or undetonated bombs for a particular ordnance, okay? And cluster bombs are notorious for not working. I know they like to, so some are going to say, well, they're very good against, you know, for armor piercing. No, they're not. No, they're not. That's the same argument for depleted uranium. Guess what? Most of the casualties, again, civilians. People get cancer from depleted uranium. Even the troops who are carrying this crap and sitting next to it in a tank, they are also at risk of you know, cancer and other illnesses. Remember Agent Orange in the Vietnam War? You know, they dropped so much of this stuff, and it's so bad that their own soldiers, U.S. soldiers, they got sick from it. I want to show you this from the Halo Trust. They say around 20,000 people, 40% of them children, have been killed or injured by cluster bombs or other unexploded items in Laos since the Vietnam War ended. Now, of course, you know, the United States officially doesn't use them anymore, but we should be very clear. The United States, Ukraine, and Russia, none of them have signed the convention on cluster munitions. So this is the 2008 convention. And I want to be clear, cluster bombs are so bad that 123 countries have signed this. 123 countries. That's most countries. I think that speaks for itself. It speaks for itself. Now, even though the United States hasn't signed this, they said and they claimed that they are phasing them out, which really doesn't mean anything. I mean, you know, after you've littered and poisoned and polluted Yugoslavia and Iraq and Vietnam, it's too late. It's too late. I'm sorry. It's too late. These things are difficult to demine, to get rid of. The United States doesn't even bother doing that. You know, they throw a few million here and there, but that doesn't fix the problem. And so you have to keep in mind that the United States and the United Kingdom were selling this crap to Saudi Arabia so that Saudi Arabia could use it in Yemen. So Yemen is now also littered with cluster bombs, unexploded cluster bombs that are going to maim and kill people in the future. I think that you know, this is really something that is so disgusting. And I hope I've made my point, although I'm far from done. You guys need to you need to understand that, you know, Barack Obama, he's the one who in the end you know, he put a ban on exporting into Saudi Arabia, but he only did that after he had sold tons of this stuff and other munitions to Saudi Arabia, right? Remember, Obama made around $115 billion in arms sales to Saudi Arabia. So Donald Trump then did $300 billion. Disgusting. And look at the response from the administration. Look at Jake Sullivan, what he says.
Is that it is going to use these in a very careful way that is aimed at minimizing any risk to civilians. And by the way, Ukraine, the democratically elected government of Ukraine, has every incentive to minimize risk to civilians because it's their citizens. It's Ukrainians who they are trying to protect and defend. This is not Ukraine taking these and going and using them in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia or in some faraway land. They're using them on their territory to defend their territory. Is that it is going to...
I've never heard anything so dumb in my life. Ukraine using these in Ukraine makes this even worse. if you care about Ukraine, you would never use or send them cluster bombs. You would never send them depleted uranium. You know why? Because just like in Cambodia, and just like in Laos and Vietnam and Iraq and Yugoslavia, guess what? These things are not going to explode. And then people in Ukraine will get maimed and they will lose their limbs or their lives because of these cluster bombs. So if your objective is to, kick the Russians out and take back every inch of Ukraine, then you're going to what? You're going to maim and kill Ukrainians. The depleted uranium will give Ukrainians cancer, just like it did in Iraq. You are not going to defy the laws of physics in Ukraine because you think that, cluster bombs and depleted uranium can be used safely. Are you out of your goddamn mind? These people hate Ukraine. The Russians using that, scandalous. But you're saying you're with Ukraine. You say you stand by Ukraine's side and you want to help them. You're not helping them. You are hurting them. And yeah, the Russians using that, disgusting. Disgusting. No excuse. They have no excuse to use this. Look at how Jem Psaki was speaking when during the beginning of the war. They were saying, "Oh, look, Russia's using cluster munitions in Ukraine." Look what she said.
There are reports of illegal cluster bombs and vacuum bombs being used by the Russians. If that's true, what is the next step of this administration? And is there a red line for how much violence will be tolerated against civilians in this manner that's illegal and potentially a war crime?
It would be. I don't have any confirmation of that. We have seen the reports. If that were true, it would potentially be a war crime. Obviously, there are a range of international fora that would assess that. So certainly we would look to that to be a part of that conversation.
There are reports of illegal.
You know what makes this even worse? It's that it's not just Jake Sullivan cooking up these fairy tales. I want to read to you. This is Ukraine. This is Ukraine's government. Ukraine's government laying out 5 principles, they say, right? They have 5 principles for the use of these weapons, okay? Where they're claiming that, they're going to use them responsibly. They promise, okay? They really, really promise. Look at this. So Ukraine's government says that the first principle is that Ukraine will use these cluster bombs only for the liberation of its internationally recognized territories. These munitions will not be used on the officially recognized territory of Russia. I don't know what to say to this. Once again, my point still stands. The fact that Ukraine wants to use this horrific weapon on its own soil is even worse than if it were to use it in Russia, because, if they hate the Russians, then they would be hurting the Russians in that way. But now, the only thing that they're going to achieve is hurting their own population now and in the future. And then they say here that the armed forces undertake not to use cluster munitions in cities. Cluster munitions will be used only in those areas where the Russian military is concentrated to break through the Russian defense lines. Yeah, so the counteroffensive is so, it is so abysmal. It's such a failure. They think that they're going to break through the Russian lines using cluster bombs. No, you're not. That's not going to happen. The Ukrainians are unable to even reach the Russian defenses, the dragon's teeth, the trenches. And the idea that, we're only going to use them in, battlefields and not in cities. What does that even mean? Are Ukrainians not going to reside and live and work in these areas once you kick the Russians out? You don't have farmers. Ukraine is notorious for its grain, right? It doesn't matter if you use it in a city or not. No matter where you use it, the whole point is that these things are spread out over a large area. They're indiscriminate and you cannot control them. These things are like this. They fit. One of them can fit in the palm of your hand. You cannot recognize it. You cannot even see it. After it's hit the soil and there's a bit of dirt on it, and it's rained and rusted. You cannot tell it apart from a stone or a rock. And that's how people lose their limbs. That's why 94% of casualties of cluster bombs are civilians. Ukraine will keep strict records of the use of these weapons and the local areas where they will be used. And based on these records, these territories will be priority areas for mine clearance after the liberation of our territories and our victory. And Ukraine will report to its partners on the use and effectiveness of these munitions. What effectiveness? You don't have to use them and then, make reports. You can go look at the terror that has been inflicted on people in Southeast Asia and in the Middle East and Yugoslavia because of the United States using these very same munitions. You see, the thing here is that the United States has run out of 155 millimeter rounds, for the howitzers, artillery, because again, cluster munitions can be dropped by air, by land, by sea. They can be fired from all three. And the United States has run out of conventional munitions to give Ukraine. The military-industrial complex are making so much money. They're making so much money, they cannot even keep up with production. They are unable to satisfy the hunger of the war machine. Even Biden himself admits this, and that's his justification for sending them cluster bombs. Guess what? You're doing the United States two solids, not just one solid, two solids. You are not only making money for the military-industrial complex, you're also helping the United States get rid of these things that are just lying around in warehouses. Listen to this.
I have news today. The news is that the administration is going to provide cluster munitions to the Ukrainians. These are weapons that 100 nations ban, including some of our closest NATO allies. When there was news that the Russians might be using it, admittedly, against civilians, your then press secretary said this might be the constitute war crimes. What made you change your mind and decide to give them these weapons?
Two things, Fareed, and it was a very difficult decision on my part. And by the way, I discussed this with our allies, discussed this with our friends.
Oh, poor Biden. It was so difficult, With a heavy heart, he littered Ukraine with cluster bombs. Well done. I'm sorry, but if this makes the Russians war criminals, makes you a war criminal too. And this guy Biden, who pushed for the Iraq invasion, never been held accountable for that, by the way. Yeah, and Yugoslavia and so on.
Up on a hill, and we're in a situation where Ukraine continues to be brutally attacked across the board by munitions, by these cluster munitions that have dud rates that are very, very low, very high, that are a danger to civilians, number one. Number two, the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition. The ammunition that they call them 155 millimeter weapons. This is a war relating to munitions, and they're running out of that ammunition, and we're low on it. And so what
hold on a second. I thought the Russians are low on ammo. I thought it's the Russians that are, man, they're in such a desperate place, right? There is such a grave situation that they have to go begging the Iranians to give them drones. Oh, those crappy Iranian drones, which are also crap but also deadly at the same time. Wow, what a contradiction. I thought the Russians are losing. I thought the Russians are getting their asses spanked. What's this now that you've run out of ammunition? What? Do you see how this guy contradicts himself? They keep telling us the Russians are losing, the Russians have no ammo, the Russians are desperate.
Finally took the recommendation of the Defense Department to not permanently, but to allow for, in this transition period where we get more 155 weapons, these shells for the Ukrainians, to provide them with something that has a very low dud rate. It's about I think it's 150, which is the least likely to be blowing, and it's not used in civilian areas. They're trying to get through those trenches and then stop those tanks from rolling. And so
it's not used in civilian areas. Okay, hold on a second. Hold on a second. If it's not a civilian area, then why are you trying to liberate it? Are you telling me that once you kick the Russians out of eastern Ukraine, that it's just going to be a giant military base? or no one is going to live there? What do you mean it's not civilian areas? I thought the whole point is that you're trying to kick the Russians out so you can, you know, have Ukrainians just go back to living their lives, right? There are millions of refugees that have left. Yep. And been displaced internally and externally. Are they not going to return home? What do you mean they're not civilian areas? The whole country, you know, except obviously with the exception of military bases, is for people to live in. And even if it's, let's say hypothetically, it's going to be one giant military base. How the hell do you walk there? How do you walk in a minefield? It's a minefield. Let me be very clear. When you drop cluster bombs, you are creating a minefield. There is a reason that most of the casualties, 94%, are civilians. It's not a joke. It doesn't matter what Biden says, oh, we're not going to use them in civilian areas. You don't know that, and you can't control that.
But it was not an easy decision, and it's not. We're not signatories to that agreement. But it took me a while to be convinced to do it. But the main thing is they either have the weapons to stop the Russians now keep them from stopping the Ukrainian offensive through these areas, or they don't. And I think they needed them.
What did he just say?
Ukrainian offensive. They either have the weapons to stop the Russians now keep them from stopping the Ukrainian offensive.
Stop the Russians from stopping the Ukrainian offensive. Christ, what a word salad. Whatever. Let me show you some other blissful news. So on the same day that the Biden administration says, yep, we are going to send Ukraine a weapon that is notorious for, you know, getting civilians killed and having their limbs and their sight taken from them forever. The same day, she decides to endorse Joe Biden 18 months before the election. Ah! Wow, what a progressive, whatever the hell that means, right? It's like they're not even bothering with Bernie Sanders this time. It's like, shut up, old man. You've done your job. Good job. You rolled over twice. Sit. This is pathetic. I mean, you know, AOC and the squad, you know, they went from, we're going to give them hell. We're going to Washington. We're going to the Hill to really give it to them, you know? And now it's like, even the headline kind of says it all. A signal of democratic unity. That means shut the fuck up and do what you're told and sit down. I mean, once again, if Putin is a war criminal for using cluster bombs in Ukraine, then how is Joe Biden any different? I mean, Joe Biden, remember, Yugoslavia, Iraq, especially Iraq. He's always been a war criminal. He's a neoconservative. And AOC, like everybody in the Democratic Party, especially the Democratic Party, but it's both, right? She is a neoconservative. She will not say that to you, but you can tell that she's a neoconservative. All the lies about Venezuela, you know, she'll repeat them. You know, whatever regime change, she goes along with it in Latin and Central America. You know, the same crap about, Assad this and Assad that, and the same towing the same line about Russia and NATO. You know, they are neoconservatives. Every single one of them is a neoconservative. And that really pretty much tells you everything you need to know. The fact that she comes out and endorses Joe Biden for re-election 18 months before the election. I mean, this is really, wow, the pinnacle of progressivism, right? Well done. Well done. Here's Rishi Sunak, our prime minister, apparently, and he, unelected prime minister, and he had this to say.
The UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. We've done that by providing heavy battle tanks and most recently long-range weapons, you know, and hopefully all countries can continue to support Ukraine. Russia's act of barbarism is causing untold suffering to millions.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but did you ask anyone in England if we want you to support Ukraine? Who the hell said that we want to give Ukraine Storm Shadow missiles and battle tanks? Who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? Who said that this is what people in England want? Nobody is consulted about this. It's just like, yeah, let's do this. You know, it's good money for friends at BAE Systems and so on, right? And Enfield, and yeah, great money, right? Same people. And I'll let him finish.
Of people, it's right that we collectively stand up to it, and I'll be heading off to the NATO summit next week in Vilnius, where we will be discussing exactly this with our allies, how we can strengthen our support for Ukraine.
Thank you for those platitudes, Rishi. Despite the UK not sending cluster munitions, which I guess is a win, the depleted uranium shells and munitions are being sent to Ukraine. Okay, so now the British position is that we're not going to create minefields in Ukraine, but we will give Ukrainians cancer, 10 years, 20 years down the line, or their children massive birth defects 10 years, 20 years down the line. Well done. So, making Ukraine radioactive, just like Fallujah. Well done. Something to be very proud of. You've really made us look good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Jesus Christ. Yeah, this is shameful. This is shameful. And like I said, both the UK and the US sold cluster bombs to Saudi Arabia, and they have been used in Yemen. This is an undisputed fact. And like I said, half a problem solved not sending cluster bombs. But the other half with depleted uranium, this is unforgivable. Really, these are the two most disgusting things, the two most disgusting weapons that were used in Iraq. The third is probably white phosphorus. Okay, I mean, you can of course say that, well, all of the weapons used in Iraq were disgusting. The invasion was disgusting. Yes, sure, but the depleted uranium, people don't even know that it's there, right? Because with Nagasaki and Hiroshima, you know that something just happened, and you run like the goddamn wind in the other direction. With depleted uranium, it's a silent killer. People don't know that it's there. It pollutes the community, the soil, the environment, the residents. It corrupts their DNA. Their children have massive birth defects. You have more in Fallujah than in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So I don't. These are documented, quantifiable scientific facts. Depleted uranium and cluster bombs kill civilians. They are atrocious, horrific weapons. Horrific. Why would you pollute and litter and Ukraine's soil with this stuff? Especially if you claim to care about Ukraine, right? I mean, even as an adversary, to do this is evil, right? And the Russians, like I said, using cluster bombs. How can you defend that? Biden says, oh, well, we didn't sign the convention. So who cares? Do you have to sign it to know that this is a bad weapon? You know it's a bad weapon, and you shouldn't send it. This is just like I said, the two main reasons here. Number one, Ukraine's counteroffensive is a massive failure. It's a flop. And now they are resorting to, maybe let's blow up Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and blame it on the Russians, and then get NATO to come in, reinforce it with NATO troops on the ground. Or, we can use cluster bombs, I suppose. And the other reason is, of course, they actually are losing the war right now. The way things are going right now, and that might change, but right now, Ukraine is in a very bad position militarily and strategically speaking, right? They are unable to penetrate through the Russian lines. They have run out of ammunition, and it's convenient for the United States to get rid of these things, okay? And Blinken, the Secretary of State, was saying earlier that we have completely destroyed all of our chemical weapons stockpile. I highly doubt it, but okay. And I jokingly said that well, how did you FedEx it to the Ukrainians with the depleted uranium and cluster bombs? These are terrible weapons, and you cannot control them, and you cannot predict what they will do, but you can get a pretty good idea from the past, and they know what they're doing, and sending the stuff is evil. It's just evil. Here, take a look at this weapon, which is God, it's so bad. One second. You guys can see that? Thank you, Winston, for the super chat. Winston said, sickening, these evil, sinister people would just drive humanity to extinction. Well, they're certainly trying. They're certainly trying. They're giving it a good go. You know, the way things are headed. I mean, I think this goes without saying, but this is an escalation, you know. Okay. What I'm about to show you is real. This is not a joke, and it's not a parody. This video, this promotional video of an Israeli weapon, I mean, I'm speechless. Just look.
Elbit Systems presents Lanius Search and Attack in One. New, innovative, autonomous, lethal solution. Lanius is equipped with AI technologies that allows navigation to building, scanning the building to identify openings, scanning and mapping, object avoidance, enemy detection and classification, target incrimination by human, and lethality. The system indemnifies blocked openings and can perform ad hoc lethal ambush.
I love how there has to be a man just yelling incoherently in Arabic, you know, to make you understand this is a terrorist. He's a baddie, right? Oh, look, the bad Arab.
Lanius, search and attack in one.
So you can see the logo. It says Elbit Systems. Guess what country runs Elbit Systems? This is an Israeli company, right? They have plants in England, which is a disgrace, that is frankly, you know, immeasurable beyond words. The fact that these murderers and disgusting companies are allowed to operate in England. You know, they also market a lot of their weapons and call them battle tested. And what they mean by battle tested is that they have used them in Palestine against Palestinians, right? And so now, of course, you can see that they have a new suicide drone. And wow, I mean, this is really what the world needs. They're, you know, well done. Truly contributing to humankind. What am I supposed to say? I mean, you guys really I bet some of you still think this is a parody or somebody made this up. It's not made up. I swear to God, this is a real thing. You have, you know, I thought Terminators weren't supposed to come around for quite a while, but no, they're here, you know, and they kill people randomly shouting in Arabic, you know, like, so you know that this guy's a terrorist, right? Jesus Christ. I mean, this is sick. This is sick behavior. This is absolutely sick. And these drones that they use against Palestinians, you know, they build them in the United Kingdom, and among other things. And they have several plants that are spread out, you know, across Britain. And you know, so not only is this stuff used against Palestinians and to maintain the occupation, but also they make money from it. And you have to keep in mind, this is no different than Pegasus, right? That's also a tool that is used against Palestinians, but it's also something to make money with. And the Israelis, they have an extensive and elaborate military-industrial complex that is quite similar, not necessarily in size, but, you know, in nature, it's quite similar to the American one. But I would argue it's even worse, which is really saying something given how, unforgivable and unrelenting the military-industrial complex in the United States is. Like, imagine how bad that is. The Israeli one is even worse because the Israelis, they are actually, using this to sustain the existence of Israel itself, the European colony known as Israel. And of course, they make money, right? So I don't need to tell you, of course, that this has a million and one ways to go wrong. They say in the advert, in the promotional video, that it has enemy recognition and classification. What does that mean? Are you? I hope it works, right? I hope you classify Palestinian children as terrorists and Palestinian journalists, right? Can we count on you to do that? Splendid, jolly good show up, boy. When the Israelis say enemy classification, I would, I'd start sweating bullets, no pun intended, because you don't know what the hell that even means. Everyone and anything that moves is a terrorist to them. So, but you and I, we know who the real terrorists are. The Israelis went into Nablus, which is, again, this is in the West Bank, not to be confused, of course, with Jenin, which is, I know you might be confused because it happened 2 days ago, and that was already, a giant massacre. They completely destroyed Jenin, but Nablus is in the West Bank, and they shot dead 2 men. I mean, look at the door. I think the door speaks for itself. It's just riddled with bullets. Riddled. Talk about the Israelis calling themselves, we are the most moral army in the world. Yeah, okay. Nobody condemns them for invading the West Bank, invading Jenin, invading Nablus. And again, even if you accept this partition plan of 1947, sorry, but this is Palestine. So every single time the Israelis go in there, that's an invasion, right? I don't know why BBC and all of them, they're so clear-minded and cut and dry with their language when they talk about Ukraine. But when it comes to Palestine, they just can't seem, they can't seem to get it right. And they also talk about, well, Israel has a right to defend itself. No, it doesn't, because it's in Palestine. And also, I don't see you talking about the Russians' right to defend themselves, do you? So anyway, they killed, I'm going to start calling these death squads, because what else, I mean, how else could you describe this, right? You have columns of vehicles driving into a refugee camp like Jenin and shooting people dead, bombing them with planes, bombing them with drones, helicopters, tanks, you name it. Are these not death squads? Because every week or every second week, they just send in these columns, they murder people, and then they go back out. These are death squads, and I will refer to them as such. So these Israeli death squads went into Nablus yesterday, and they killed 2 men, okay? Hamza Maqboul and Khairi Shahin. So they were shot dead, and then a third Palestinian, Abdel Saleh, was shot in the village near Ramallah, which is also in the West Bank. The Nablus raid was described by some locals as an invasion, according to Al Jazeera correspondent Alan Fisher. Okay, so they raided the city in search of 2 men, one considered to be affiliated with Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, and I think the other one was with the PFLP, I don't recall, but they'll come and tell you, well, they were terrorists. They were militants. Once again, this is supposed to be Palestine under international law, so everybody with a gun is not a terrorist just because you want them to be terrorists. You are. You're the one invading. You're the one coming in. Palestinians have every right to defend themselves, whether they're throwing rocks or nuclear missiles, right? To kind of get the point across. Here, listen to this question. So this is a journalist asking Guterres, who's the UN Secretary General, whether Palestinians need a protection force. Look at what he says. Look at how he responds.
Secretary General, 3 special rapporteurs today have accused Israel of possible war crimes in Jenin for actions that amount to egregious violations of international law and standards of use of force. Does that square with what you have described today in terms of the attacks on hospitals, on infrastructure, civilian infrastructure? Do those attacks amount to war crimes? And yesterday, Palestine's ambassador again talked about the need for an international protection force. Is this something you can endorse? Do Palestinians need an international force to protect them from Israel?
I don't think it's realistic to think that we can have a military force sent to Israel. I don't think the Israeli government would consent on that possibility. But I think we need to find mechanisms to allow for the protection of civilians in these dramatic circumstances. Thank you very much.
It's quite the non-answer. Mechanisms and mechanisms. Pretty much all the UN does, unfortunately. I don't think the Israelis would consent. By the way, in Jenin, which she was just talking about, the Israelis managed to also shoot up a UNRWA, so the UN relief agency, one of the offices or schools that they use. I don't remember what it was, but it's just like typical. Every time they go in, whether it's in Gaza or pick any one of the operations that they've run, they always end up damaging UN buildings, vehicles, or killing UN personnel. Not every single time, but they do it often enough that there's a clear culture of bullying the United Nations peacekeepers, whether it's in Lebanon or it's in Syria or UNRWA in Palestine. This is why Palestinians take things into their own hands, because no one is helping them. And I mean, that's not true, because they are being helped by Iran, by Lebanon, by Syria, by Yemen. And the Israelis, they can make as many suicide drones as they like. But what did we see 3 weeks ago when they went into Jenin? They were incapable of doing anything. And even a few days ago, yes, they laid waste to Jenin, but they still had to, in the end, they had to withdraw. They were kicked out. They couldn't complete their mission, their stated goal of uprooting the fighters. You can't uproot the fighters. You're the one creating the fighters and watering them, and watering the soil, to use a terrible analogy. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? So Israel is responsible for any so-called militants or terrorists that they keep whining about. When you keep behaving like this, you make people hate you, because this is hateful behavior. I don't know what you expect. They think that they can just crush people. It's not going to work. Remember that the Israelis have come to Palestine. The Palestinians are from Palestine. So in the end, only one of them is going to fight harder, because they have nowhere else to go. Palestinians have nowhere else to go, and they shouldn't need to go anywhere else. And their will to fight and to survive and to keep the land is always going to be stronger. So even if Israel has the technological upper hand for now, they're on a losing streak. And I've told you this before, because all their attempts to weaken Hamas, to weaken the PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, all of the factions in the West Bank, they failed, right? You got the Lions, you got the Jenin Brigade, you have the Syria al-Quds. These guys are stronger than ever. Hezbollah is stronger than ever. Syria is, still in chaos, but PIJ, for example, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, where's the headquarters? In Damascus, in Syria. And Iran, of course, supporting them, Yemen. They've only gotten stronger. So Israel's policies and behavior doesn't work. It just doesn't work. They failed to achieve any of their objectives, and they have no moral standing. And the results really speak for themselves. So they bulldozed Jenin, but just because they are able to cause more destruction doesn't mean that they're winning. Do you understand? I want to read something to you I just want to end on this note. The French in Algeria, they annexed Algeria, right? They not only colonized it, they annexed it. They made it part of France. And even though it took 150 years, in the end, the French were kicked out. 1.5 million of them, if I recall correctly, had to flee home. They ran away and they ran back home where they came from. You cannot win on somebody else's turf, on somebody else's home turf. You're always going to lose. And they unfortunately 1.5 million Algerians were killed fighting the War of Independence. But in the end, they lost, and the Israelis, it will be no different with them. They will have to go back to where they came from, because they are colonizers. You can't win. You can't win against the Palestinians. I want to show you something here. This is something that is, first of all, just before I continue, I want to thank you guys for the super chats. Thank you, Omar, and who says support BDS, support boycott, divestment, sanctions, and Starchild, who says, hold on, it scrolled up. Starchild says they didn't use them when they dropped those towers in Gaza. You mean the cluster bombs? And Wachtel says the drones look like the mechs in RoboCop 2. yeah, you're right. Pradesh says, Richard, be 100% honest. Do you ever see Palestine getting liberated ever? Of course, God willing, we pray and hope, but be 100% honest. Yeah, I do. To be honest, I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I mean, I'm being a bit pessimistic, but I hope I'll be around to see it, And you too. I hope we're all around to see it. It'll be a sweet victory. Wesley said the UN is nothing more than a mouthpiece of the United States. It needs very major political and structural reforms in lieu of being completely abolished. I absolutely agree. I agree 100%. 120%. The idea of the UN is a very good one, but this idea that you have veto power for just a few countries and they have permanent seats on the Security Council, this is a giant flaw. And then, of course, as you mentioned, being a mouthpiece for the US. No, it's unacceptable. And there needs to be an enforcement mechanism. It's very nice to have on paper, something saying that Israel's annexation of Jerusalem is illegal. There we go. Yeah, this is for my next segment. I'll show you in a second. But I agree 100%. Cyborg says the entire Arab world would march to Palestine and rescue the Palestinians if it wasn't to the tank-riding dictators appointed by the West. What can I say? You're right. Keep in mind, a lot of Arab countries, unfortunately, were just randomly created by Britain and by France. And I think it's madness that the Arabs keep these borders, and in Africa, remember, in Africa, the Europeans also drew these borders randomly. Although not randomly implies like they didn't know what they were doing. They did this on purpose in a way that fans the flames of sectarianism and ethnic and religious strife on purpose. So just going back to the case of the Arab world, the problem is that ideally, and I think most Arabs would agree, it would be lovely to have something like the European Union, or a federation. I mean, the European Union is not exactly a nice thing to want, but you know what I mean. I'm talking about a union, because it is united. Same. You have a common language, common tongue, religion, history, culture, etc. But the problem is you have people who are in power and they don't want to let go now that they've been given power. It's difficult, right? It's difficult to yank them from these positions and just go back to how it was. And That's the perilous situation, the difficult situation that has been created. You know, once you've carved these countries up or places up, and you've created new seats of power, it's difficult to get those presidents or leaders out. And I'm not implying all of them are bad, but you know, like you said, some of them they just do the bidding of the West, unfortunately. So just 1 second, I'm just gonna get something to drink, and then we'll continue. And I have a really, really important segment to do with you guys, so don't go anywhere. So you have another terrorist attack in Ukraine. This time it's the Kakhovka Dam. And the first thing the media do is blame the Russians. So let's see why the Russians would do it. They control the dam. They control the region. They need the dam to funnel water to Crimea, which is also under Russian control. They literally have zero motive. There is no motive. You know, the Washington Post in December published an article showing how Ukraine targeted this dam using American missiles, using the HIMARS system. They actually fired a missile at this dam to test if they could flood areas. Sound familiar? This is the same thing that we saw with the Nord Stream pipeline attacks, right? The first thing the press do is let's go and blame Russia. And now, almost a year later, the Washington Post finally admits that Ukraine, not Russia, Ukraine blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. This is something that I, myself, and others have been saying since the very beginning. Anyone with half a brain knew that it was not Russia. Russia would not blow up their own pipeline. But, you know, this was dismissed as a crackpot conspiracy theory that NATO would maybe do this, or Ukraine. No, that's Russian propaganda. And another example, the Nazi patches. This week, the New York Times also finally admit that Ukrainian soldiers en masse are wearing Nazi patches to the point that Western journalists have to ask them to hide the patches before they take photos of them. I mean, this is despicable on another level. And then later they claim that these are authentic photos. This is not journalism. This is curated propaganda. So are the New York Times and Washington Post doing propaganda now, right? They're doing Russian disinformation. These people are not doing journalism, all right? You guys are a year late. Only publishing the truth when nobody cares anymore. That's not journalism, okay? They are the ones doing disinformation. They are the ones doing propaganda. And these acts of state terrorism, blowing up pipelines and dams, European leaders say literally absolutely nothing. And all they do is give more money and more weapons to an army where men are wearing Nazi patches and blowing up our infrastructure. So what's the conclusion? Always ask yourself, who stands to gain? Whether we're talking about the Crimea Bridge, Nord Stream pipelines, or the Kakhovka Dam like today, always ask yourself who stands to benefit, and you'll find the answer, you'll find the truth. So everyone's talking about how Donald Trump has been indicted under the Espionage Act. But what a lot of people don't understand is that the Espionage Act is a law that has always been used in the United States as a political tool to silence opponents. It was crafted in 1917, so during World War I, and one of its most famous victims was Eugene Debs. He was given 10 years in prison and stripped of his citizenship because he gave an anti-war speech. Ellsberg, Manning, Kiriakos, Snowden, they were all charged under the Espionage Act as well, and none afforded a public interest defense. Yet another reason why the Espionage Act is a political tool to silence whistleblowers, quite literally, even in court. Even worse, it's also being used to threaten Julian Assange, a publisher, with almost 200 years in prison. So many people are upset about Trump putting classified documents in the bathroom. I wonder if they care just as much about freedom of speech and press freedoms. Trump definitely put America's national security at risk, not for bringing home documents, but assassinating Soleimani, the equivalent of Iran's defense minister. How come Trump's critics never attack him for actual crimes, like putting illegal sanctions on millions of people or stealing oil from Syria?
We're keeping the oil. We have the oil. The oil is secure. We left troops behind only for the oil.
Okay, guys, I'm back. Let's continue. This is Very, very important segment. I actually hold that thought. One thing I wanted to say before we begin is that sorry, when it comes to when it comes to the Arab world, one solution, because it's, like I said, it's going to be very difficult to say, for example, like, we should because if you say let's go back to the old borders, meaning you dismantle and reverse everything that France and Britain and the West engineered, not everybody's going to go for it, because these countries that have been created, as I mentioned, the presidents or the royal families that run these countries, they're not going to want to let go. It's so difficult. Even if the idea is marvelous and most Arab people agree with it, it's going to be difficult. So another solution is to simply, keep the Arab League, but make it a true Arab League, not some, nonsense that's driven in part by the West, where, Syria is kicked out and then, Syria is brought back in a decade later. What is the point of all this stuff? And then you should have something where, like what Gaddafi was proposing, where you have an African currency and or an Arab currency. Why not the same one? Something that is backed by the resources, the vast resources that you have in Arabia, you have in the Middle East, you have in Africa. Excuse me. So, you could just make it into a federation. And by the way, at one point, you did have a federation with Libya, Egypt, and I think Iraq and Syria were supposed to join, but then there were issues because, when you had the United Arab Republic, so this is when Syria and Egypt became one country. Amazing, right? That's where Syria gets its current flag from, right? The Assadist flag, which was, Assad and nor his father, neither Assad nor his father were even heard of, never mind presidents, when Syria got this flag, but okay. That the problem back then, the criticism is that the Egyptians had too much control. I think that's why Iraq didn't want to join, because they were afraid of being dominated by Egypt. And I understand you're always going to have criticisms and so on, but no one is saying that it has to be like that where Egypt dominates everyone. No, the idea just to have pan-Arabism is a very rich idea. It's a very important idea, because the West, the reason that they've carved up Arabia and the Arab world is because they fear having a competitor. If you have channels that do this, like, what if all the Arabs were one country, and then they go into like hypotheticals. The army would be this size, the population would be this size, the GDP, population density. It's very interesting. The point is, though, that if you had, like, let's say from Morocco all the way to to Saudi Arabia, one country, this would be the third superpower in the world, right? One of the best armies, largest populations, one of the largest land masses. All the characteristics that make and define a superpower. These attributes of hard power combined with soft power, very important. And this would be the oil, never mind the oil and the resources. Imagine a currency backed by these resources. I mean, that you're looking at a major competitor to Europe. Nobody in Europe wants that. That's a nightmare for them. They're already, look at how they demonize the Chinese and the Russians for daring to be as good as them, if not better. And again, all the characteristics, geographic landmass, population, army, etc. The Russians and Chinese have this, and actually China's going to overtake the United States. So this has always scared the French. It has always scared the British. It has always scared Europeans. If the Arabs are one country, it would be a nightmare for them. Not because anything bad is going to happen, but because, like true capitalists, they actually hate competition. You'll have this argument that actually capitalism inspires competition. Having good products, motivates other people to start their own companies or whatever, their own businesses, and then having competition generates innovation and so on, and it's very nice. But actually, when it comes down to it, there is no competition. It's about monopoly, monopolizing. That's why you have the United States trying to do what? Monopolize everything. We want to control what happens in the Western Hemisphere. We want to control what happens in Saudi Arabia, and with the oil in Iran and the gas in Iran and the gas in Russia and the oil there. We want to control Europe. We want to control this and that. It's about dominance. And European colonialists, they fear this. They fear this. And Israel has all the characteristics of a European colony: land theft, resource theft, ethnic cleansing, transfer of population. But that falls under ethnic cleansing. And I think one of you was asking in the comments, where would the Israelis go? Home. Many Israelis have dual citizenship, some of them even triple citizenship. And the reason that I bring this up is because, number one, even if you have just Israeli citizenship, so many doors are open to you. You are treated with respect when you travel. You can actually get visas. No one discriminates against you. Palestinians don't even have, Palestine is not even a full member state in the UN. Palestinians, it's so difficult for them to get travel documents. When they get them, they have something that people in airports don't even recognize, so they get questioned, like, what is this document? This is not a real passport. Even getting a visa is a problem in the first place. They don't have anywhere to go. You know why? Because they're Palestinians. They come from Palestine. The point is that the Israelis, I said this many times and I'll keep saying it, every single Israeli prime minister, whether it's Netanyahu or Golda Meir, or from the first one till the current one, every single Israeli prime minister was either born in Eastern Europe, or their parents were born in Eastern Europe, or their grandparents. They are all Europeans. And it is disgusting that they come to Palestine. Because look, when you had mass waves of European Jews emigrating to Palestine, which was motivated and spurred on by Zionism, there was no problem, right? Because people, for thousands of years, you had Jews and Muslims and Christians living side by side. This is literally Palestine, Syria, the Middle East. This is literally where Judaism comes from, where Islam comes from, where Christianity comes from. So, of course, people there have different religions and different ethnicities and backgrounds and have been living there for thousands of years. This is the cradle of civilization. Everything started here. So there's no problem. But when, the Zionists, militias, Hashemir, Haganah, which are the precursors to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, not very defensive, but these militias were starting to assassinate British officers because it was a British mandate, Palestine. They were assassinating Jews who were opposed to Zionism, and they were assassinating and killing Arabs, And so these militias took over, and that's it. There's a difference between emigrating somewhere and then emigrating somewhere and trying to make, take the land and make a country out of it. I find it so disgusting how refugees that Europe created, that Europe and the United States created in Afghanistan, in Syria. These are wars that the United States and Europe created, and with their allies like Turkey and Saudi Arabia. They demonize refugees, right? Like, oh, we don't want refugees. Oh, refugees commit crime. All this like xenophobic nonsense. What's happening is actually you have skilled and I don't like this term unskilled labor. My point is just that you have, plumbers, you got builders, architects, teachers, you name it. This is a workforce. It's a workforce. A free workforce in Canada, in Germany, in the West, and these refugees are generated by the West, and they complain about them. When they're actually benefiting, they are benefiting from a free young workforce. And then on the flip side, the Israelis or the Zionists who emigrated to Palestine, they're literally taking up arms and, as I said, assassinating the British officers, non-Zionist Jews, Arabs, and taking the land by force. That is actually a giant crime, a crime against humanity, ethnic cleansing, the Nakba, the ongoing assaults. Look at what they did to Jenin the other day. I mean, this is something to be angry about. This is something that is offensive, that is disgusting, that is truly criminal in nature. It's colonialism, right? So like I said, these hypocrites, they complain about refugees, which they created. And then when you look at what Zionism has done to Palestine, not a goddamn peep. They don't have the balls to say a word about Israel. They tuck their tails between their legs and run off like goddamn chickens. They don't have the spine to criticize Israel. Let me show you something that is going to make you so angry and sad. This is really outrageous, and I need you guys. I need you guys to please share this video, because this is one of the saddest stories that you are ever going to hear in your life. So 3 years ago, there's a Palestinian man, 32 years old. His name is Eyad Hallaq, and he's autistic. And he was, there he is. You can see his mother holding his portrait. He was shot dead by an Israeli border guard. Now, his mother said that Eyad has the mental age of a 7-year-old. Okay? So he's like a kid. He's a kid. And he comes from Jerusalem, occupied Jerusalem, and he goes to a special needs school. Okay? And he's on his way to school, and an Israeli border guard starts chasing him and yelling at him that he's a terrorist, and then this border guard and his commander start chasing him, and they shoot him in the leg. He starts bleeding out, and he goes to hide in a garbage room, in a trash room, and it just so happens that his teacher from the school is also walking there, and she sees what's happening, and she's the first one to go into the trash room, and she sees these Israelis, and she's begging them to stop. She's trying to explain he's autistic, I'm his teacher, and she goes to call the director, and they execute him. This border guard fired 3 bullets in his chest with an M16, killed him. And yesterday morning, an Israeli court let him go. He walked free. This is his mother screaming, just howling after the court let her son's killer walk free. Now, you need to understand that this Israeli border guard, he accused Eyad of having a gun. This is a lie. There is no gun. There was no gun. Nothing. As I said, his mother says he has the mental age of a 7-year-old. He has no concept of, even what he's living in, which is an occupation. He has no concept of a terrorist or whatever they're trying to yell at him. He was scared. He's like, he does not understand. He's scared, and he ran because that's his instinctive reaction. He's done nothing wrong. And even after his teacher is explaining to the border guard, he is autistic, I am his teacher, the border guard executes him. So he knows what's going on, right? He knows that this guy, he does not have a gun, and then he kills him anyway. And at the time, the same day, you know what happened? The Israelis, the Shin Bet, which is their equivalent of the FBI, right? So it's the internal security. They raid his parents' house. So they kill Eyad and they raid his parents' house. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to find dirt. They were hoping to find something bad in the house so that they could say, oh, look, he was a terrorist after all, or something crazy. But of course, they found absolutely nothing, because there is nothing. And then they wouldn't give the body to the family for several days, which delayed the grieving process and the burial, and is very bad and painful. And the Israelis claimed that there were no cameras filming the incident, which is kind of funny because the Israelis put 50 cameras on every goddamn street, right? Everywhere. They have cameras in every corner, okay? So this turned out to be a lie, and you can see the footage. Magically, some footage appeared out of nowhere. Here it is. It's nothing graphic. You can see Eyad over here running.
ويمكن أن تبين محاولته الهروب من أفراد حرس الحدود وهم لاحقون المشاهد لا تبين أنه شكل خطرا على أحد وتظهر.
In the courtroom, I want you to grasp how disgusting this is. The guard who shot him claimed that when he entered this garbage room, he thought Eyad was going to harm this woman, his teacher, right? And that the woman was screaming, and he thought that she was screaming because she was, terrified that something was going to happen, that Eyad was going to harm her, and that Eyad was a terrorist and he had a gun or something, right? And that's ridiculous. She was screaming at the Israelis to tell them to stop. She's screaming at them, not at Eyad. She's not terrified of Eyad. She knows him. She's his teacher. She's telling them that. And then he flips and says, "Oh, I was trying to save her." What happened is after they shot him, they pointed their guns at her. They pointed their guns at the teacher even. And look at this other contradiction. So they say on the one hand, we were scared that Eyad was going to hurt the woman, his teacher. And then on the other hand, they say, when they came in the trash room, they were asking his teacher, "Where's the gun?" Right? He gave you a gun, right? Hold on a second. If he's trying to hurt her, why would he give her a gun? Just contradiction after contradiction, just insane. And he wasn't even charged with murder. It was manslaughter, which is ridiculous. I mean, this guy knew that Eyad is autistic, and he just shoots him anyway at point blank range. At point blank range, this guy's bleeding out on the floor from his leg, and that's an execution. And even in the Israeli newspapers, they were like, "What the hell is this?" I want to show you this quote that's from an Israeli journalist, Gideon Levy in Haaretz. Look what he wrote at the time, because this happened a few days, I think a week before George Floyd was killed, when they had the protests in the U.S. So this is what he wrote. He said, quote, "The border police are no less brutal or racist than the police in the United States. There, they shoot black people whose blood is cheap, and in Israel, they shoot Palestinians whose blood is even cheaper." Here's another thing that I pointed out, that actually this court that let this Israeli border guard walk free. It's funny because you not only see how there's no accountability for, Israeli crimes. The Israelis claim that they have a democracy, that they have separation of powers, and they have a working judiciary. They don't. This is a get off scot-free type of democracy, right? You can do whatever you want. If you kill a Palestinian, it doesn't matter. Autistic, not autistic, doesn't matter. You can get away with it, right? The defendant, the guard, he says that, "Well, I was a rookie at the time, and I didn't know what was going on, and my commander told me that there was a terrorist," and so on. This is such a lie. If you're a rookie, then why are you firing your gun? If you're a rookie, why are you working this job? You shouldn't even be there in the first place. Like I said here, this entire incident should not have taken place because the Israelis are illegally occupying Jerusalem, right? People talk about Russia occupying Ukraine and annexing Ukraine. I'm sorry, man. Let's deal with this. This is a far bigger issue, and it's been going on for far longer. The Israelis illegally annexed Jerusalem in 1980, before I was even born. And at the time, the United Nations declared their annexation null and void. So the Israelis passed a law called the Jerusalem Law, right? And then, of course, they annexed the Golan Heights, the Syrian Golan Heights, illegally. So my point here is that the Israelis shouldn't even be there. They have no right to be there. The UN has said you have to withdraw. You have no jurisdiction there. So this Israeli court that is saying this border guard didn't do anything wrong, it doesn't even have jurisdiction in Jerusalem in the first place. It is not. It is null and void, as the United Nations said. Israel has no right to run a court, to have border guards, to have civilians, anything in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was supposed to be a kind of special you know, in the partition plan, which the Israelis always point to, say, see, the Arabs didn't accept it, but we accepted it. And that's why we're a UN member state, and, you know, we have the legal, moral high ground and blah, blah, blah. Well, the partition plan says that Jerusalem doesn't belong to anyone. It's supposed to be a separate body, corpus separatum in Latin. You know, it's supposed to have a special legal status because it's so important to Jews and Muslims and Christians. It should be its own, you know, international and city that doesn't belong to anyone. So the court doesn't even have jurisdiction there, right? UN Security Council Resolution 478 says get the hell out, null and void. So it's truly a kangaroo court, truly a kangaroo court. And I find this so disgusting. And really, to add insult to injury, quite literally adding insult to injury, the Israeli security minister, Ben-Gvir, he yells at Eyad's mother and calls her a terrorist. Again, just so you understand this, look here, watch the video. Watch the video. So that's his mother here, and that's him on the left. You know, like what are they doing here? They've come out to you know, bully her after her son's been murdered. Again, just to recap, this is a you know, an old woman. Her son is autistic. They murdered her son. They let the killer walk free, and then on top of it, they come outside the court to insult her and call her a terrorist. Jesus Christ! I mean, I've never heard of somebody so low, truly low. You know, a true scumbag in every sense of the word. It's really hard to imagine anybody who's more depraved and more of a scumbag than Ben-Gvir. He's truly the embodiment of a scumbag. And he does all things like this, but all the time. But this one was really, you know, really, really outrageous. Another example, he would set up a tent in Sheikh Jarrah, which is a district in Jerusalem. And you might recall in the last 2 years, especially, that the Israelis have been trying to kick out Palestinians who live there so that they can let Jewish settlers move in, right? Ethnic cleansing. And what he would do is he goes and puts his tent outside their homes, outside the homes of Palestinians, so that the Israeli security services come and protect him and his supporters who are bullying and yelling at people who are inside their homes. Can you imagine somebody coming and putting a tent outside your house, and the army comes to protect that person, and their supporters are yelling at you and telling you to get out of your house, and they're just like, you know, antagonizing you and terrifying you, while the courts work to kick you out. I mean, this is disgusting beyond measure. And that's what he did, right? But this one really takes the cake. I mean, this is really a new level of low, even for him, even for Ben-Gvir. What a despicable, little, sad, pathetic person. What a sad person. He's pathetic, truly. Terrorist. The only terrorist here is Israel. When you murder an autistic person, you are the terrorist. And when the system lets that person walk free, that system is a system that inflicts terror. Do you understand? Eyad, unfortunately, you know, I don't think he was ever going to get justice. And I said this at the time because keep in mind, I was reporting on this. I was covering this from the moment it happened, right? Go back 3 years. You can see my videos on this. And I told you that this guy, I don't think Eyad Hallaq, I knew that he's not going to get any justice. I knew that the Israeli guard who killed him is going to walk free. I told you this at the time because the Israelis always do this. You can get away with murder, quite literally, whether it's in Gaza or it's in Jerusalem. No matter what you inflict on a Palestinian, you can get away with it. And by the way, Ben-Gvir, actually, it's funny because he is now the security minister, right? But he himself, he's been convicted of supporting a terrorist group, and he's you know what the Israelis call a far right ultra Zionist, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as Palestinians and anyone who sees the truth is concerned. Every Israeli, whether they are on the so-called liberal end of the spectrum or the far right end of the spectrum, they're still living on Palestinian land and Syrian land at the expense of Palestinians and Syrians. Doesn't matter what they identify as or what their feelings are. That's the reality. But he is really, definitely an extremist. And even by Israel's standards, he is an extremist, which kind of says a lot, What a disgusting person. It's very sad, though. It's very sad for Eyad. And, I don't know what to say. It's very sad. Very sad. He's innocent. He's completely innocent. I don't just mean, in the legal sense, but like as a person, his mother said he's 7 years old mentally. Like he doesn't. This is very sad. And I actually made a thread at the time on Twitter of other people who, have special needs or who are disabled mentally or physically or have any sort of handicap or in all of these categories who have been targeted by the Israelis and killed. There's no mercy. They have no mercy on anyone who's Palestinian, even people who are the most vulnerable of society, even someone like Eyad, which is I guess it's to be expected, but it still doesn't make it any easier, especially for his parents. That's really sad. So again, the most important thing that you can do is you share this video and you tell people, because if we don't do that, then the Israelis get away with it, and that is unacceptable. There is no justification for this. This is something that is so depraved. It's beyond belief, truly beyond belief. And one last thing before I forget, the Israeli guard who walked free, he was even promoted during the trial. Can you imagine? So they not only let him walk free unpunished, they also rewarded him. He was rewarded despite doing this to Eyad. That is what we are dealing with. This is Israel. This is what Israel does. Curtis says, if the Israelis are kicked out, where do they go? Well, I think I already answered your question earlier. Yeah. One good answer to this, besides what I told you, is where do the Palestinians go? Where do the Palestinians go? They're already in Palestine, and there is no other Palestine. It's like the Israelis saying, "What about Israel's right to defend itself?" When you're a bully, you don't get to talk about self-defense. When you're the aggressor, you don't get to talk about self-defense. And what about the Palestinians' right to self-defense? I'm not just speaking to Curtis. I mean, in general, right? You guys feel me, Thank you guys for these super chats and the support. I appreciate it. I need to fix the crab dance. I'm waiting to find a suitable beat because there's a copyright issue every time I play it now, which is really sad. But again, if you guys if you want to support my work and you enjoy my journalism and find it educational or informative, please consider supporting the show. I'm trying to get to 700 people on Patreon. We've already been there, but it's gone down for some reason. I think it's because of the 1st of every month. And now we're the 8th of July, so that's probably the reason. But we've got about 800 people watching now. We only just need a few dozen of you to join. Okay, that's all it takes. And you only have to donate $1 a month or €1 or £1 a month. You can pick any amount and any currency you like, and it's just a monthly donation. It's just to help support my work. I don't do like deluxe content or you don't unlock extra content. I just do my job. I do my work. Everyone can access it for free. And if you are able to support and you're willing to, I'd be most grateful. So thank you to Sant for joining, Pete, AJ, Carrie, and Joe. I appreciate that. Come on, we just need a few more to get there. And I promise you by next live stream, we will have a new crab dance cooked up and fixed. If you guys know a copyright-free or royalty-free beat that I can substitute the original with, please let me know. I know at first it won't be as good, but then we'll get used to it and it will be even better. So we'll find a good one, okay? And again, thank you to all of you for your donations on YouTube and on Patreon, Rockfan, Rumble, CashApp, and Venmo, PayPal, all of it. I'm very grateful. Thank you. Give me a second to check on PayPal. Maybe something loaded, and then I can. Actually, just to say thank you to those of you who've joined on Patreon. Let me play the alphabet one. All right, give me a second. Are you ready?
A is for
all men and women created by you know the thing.
B is for
I'm beginning to see why your wife left you.
C is for
Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
D is for
Don't worry, I'm so serious. Children, I love to hear them.
E is for
Excuse to walk by the dealer and say, no, I'm not going to be a mule. I got something to do. I got to go do boom, boom, boom.
F is for
Time friend, and she's a friend. She's been my friend in and out of public life.
G is for
Go to Joe 30330.
H is for
Hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down.
I is for
I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate.
J is for
Just look at the record.
I have President Biden, Vice President Biden.
Well, I tell you what, if you look at my record and you still doubt about my commitment, then you should vote for somebody else.
K is for
Kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
L is for
Lion, dog, face, pony soldier.
M is for
Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. The phone, make sure the kids hear work.
N is for
NATO.
O is for
The only African American woman that's ever been elected to the United States Senate.
P is for
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
R is for
Rest her soul, and although your mom's still alive.
S is for
Send a text to the word united.
T is for
Truth over facts.
U is for
Union workers, the UAW took incredible cuts in their future.
V is for
I'll vote for somebody else.
All right, thanks so much.
W is for
Wait, you're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay.
X is for
Xi Jinping.
Y is for
And you ain't black.
Z is for
You sleeping?
Women in our country has been classified as essential. So this is an issue.
By the way,
God, I apologize for putting Hillary at the end, but God, remember during the last election cycle, I mean, you just saw a lot of those gaffes, quote unquote, that Biden did. You were like, you ain't black. And then corn pop. I bet we're going to see a lot more shit. But he's going to run unopposed. I mean, who's going to, compete against Biden or contest his, his bid? Nobody. They are all pawns, and they are all. Well, pawns implies that they don't have any will or say in the situation. But they certainly do. AOC and the squad, they were all just, bend over backwards and support Biden. You saw. I'm glad you guys liked it so much. This is it's a birthday present. The clip I just played to you, it's a birthday present that Claudia made for me. So yeah, maybe that can be the crab dance from now on. You guys, I'm seeing the comments. All right, okay, we can do that. I'm live streaming right now on Rumble. Rockfin for some reason didn't work, but I'm gonna set up Odyssey and Rockfin, so we have all four. And yeah, one of you mentioned Hunter. Okay, look, let me say two things. These are kind of unrelated, but just a quick note about Joe Biden. So there's a bag of cocaine that was found in the White House, okay, in the library. And, you've had conflicting reports. Some people saying that, well, only people with special access could have actually been in that area. And then others are saying, well, sometimes people are giving permission to come to the library to access the White House library and do research. So maybe it could have been them. It could have been a visitor. And then, of course, a lot of people, especially Republicans, say it was Hunter Biden. Right? Because after the incident with his laptop, we all know that, he does crack and so on. And let me be very clear. Let's say that he's the one who left the cocaine in the White House. Okay? For argument's sake. I really don't give a crap. What I find disgusting is not whether Hunter Biden chooses to smoke crack or, vanilla ice pudding. The problem with Biden is that his father, Joe Biden, the president, made a career out of sending people to jail for doing the same drugs that his son is doing. And his son is coddled. His son is given help, is given safety, both, from legal repercussions, and also, the way that Biden speaks to his son, right? We saw from those text messages, oh, I love you. I will support you. He gives so much support, moral support to his son. And then when it comes to other people who do the same drugs, he sends them to prison, 25 years, right? Remember what he was saying with the 3 strikes law. And there's this video I put up a side by side where Joe Biden is holding up a coin, right? And he's saying like, I forgot what the amount was. It's something tiny, minuscule. He's saying like, if you do just this little bit of crack, you go to prison, 25 years, right? His son, no prison, no legal repercussions, cuddled, loved, treated very nicely. And then he treats the rest of the population like dog crap. I think that is disgusting. That is the problem. That is the message that people should be outraged about. And I'm not saying that Joe Biden's son should go to prison for 25 years because he has a drug addiction. The point that I'm trying to say is that it would be nice if people like Joe Biden offered everybody moral support and helped them the same way he helps his son. There are tons of people who are in prison who are not violent criminals. They have not, hurt anybody. They have not committed anything that is, like they're not serial rapists or something. They happen to have drugs on them. And then they were sent to prison for, ridiculous amounts of time, which only we know that people who go to prison actually come out even more criminal than when they went in. So the reason this happens is because it's a business, right? The more people you put in prison, the more meals they need to eat, the more cells you need to build, the more blankets, the more guards you have to employ. It's the prison industrial complex. In America, the United States is the largest prison population on earth. More prisoners than any country on the planet, which is really saying something, especially when the French are sending people to prison for a can of Red Bull. Okay, it's not actually, in light of that, it's the French system is looking really bad right now. But jokes aside, this is ridiculous and disproportionate. And Joe Biden, with his crime bill in 1994, the 3 strikes, he was like an ardent supporter of the war on drugs. It turns out his own son is a drug addict. And that's his problem. It's a medical problem. It's I really don't give a crap. I do give a crap, though, about Biden's hypocrisy. And I think that is disgusting because he has done real physical, tangible harm to countless people and countless families. He wants to play big tough guy and, tough on crime. And then when it comes to his son, everything's okay. No, that's hypocrisy. That's disgusting. what was the other thing I wanted to mention? One of you said it in the comments. What was it? Oh, yeah. I know that there are some people who I think are confused because they think that, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is John F. Kennedy's nephew, is a good option, And I just want to be very clear. The only thing, actually the first thing that I heard about RFK Jr. in this election cycle was his interview on a System Update where he's just, fawning over Israel. And that's really all I need to know. For me, this is a red line issue. I don't care what anybody says. RFK Jr., when he talks about NATO, and I showed you the clip, very smart, he understands it. And I'm actually shocked that he can be so astute and aware of why there's a war in Ukraine, what NATO has done. And then he turns around and just gives, blind support to Israel, and then says that Palestinians are trying to destroy the Jewish people or some crap like this. This is ridiculous. I mean, just in case you had any misconceptions, guess what? You have Jews, Christians, and Muslims in Palestine. You've always had Christians and Jews and Muslims for thousands of years. There's no problem of religion here. This is a problem related to politics, to European colonialism. Israel is a European colony, which is populated by European settlers, run by European settlers. This is a fact. Every Israeli prime minister ever, it comes from Europe, from Eastern Europe. They are not native to Palestine. They do not come from Palestine. And Palestinians do not have a problem with Jews. They have a problem with Europeans stealing their land. As do many Africans, by the way, and Asians and people in the Middle East. They also, and in America, they also have a problem with Europeans stealing their land. So for him to say that he loves Israel, I'm sorry, this is goodbye. I really don't care how great he is on other things. This is a red line issue. It should be a red line issue for anyone. And this is not something that you should, say, well, because he says he's against the military-industrial complex. How can you be against the military-industrial complex and support Israel? Israel is the biggest beneficiary of military aid from the United States. Israel is the military-industrial complex. $3.8 billion every year. And it's only going to get more, it's only going to get bigger the next time they do the package in 2026. Israel is the military-industrial complex. Look at the cyber warfare domain with Pegasus. Look at the Iron Dome, which is a co-project between the two countries, a joint project. The F-16s, the M-16s. All of these weapons that Israel uses on a daily basis against Palestinians come from the United States. They are a gift from the United States. This is the military-industrial complex directly supporting European colonialism. So I don't understand how you can say, "Oh, I'm against wars for profit," and then you support Israel. Jesus Christ, this is such a brazen contradiction. It makes no sense whatsoever. Anyone who knows what is happening in Palestine, you cannot look the other way and just say, well, it's okay because he's good on other issues. No, this is the number one issue. Sorry to burst your bubble, but anyway. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. And we have Kareem, we have Francois, and Ranmal, who just joined on Patreon. Thank you guys very much. And I'm going to play one last crab dance on my way out. And again, just so we're clear, please make sure you guys have hit the bell icon. That way you will get a notification when I go live. And if you don't want to get notifications from YouTube, but you would like to get email instead, there's a newsletter. Well, it's not a newsletter. That's the whole point. I don't do spam. I don't like spamming people. I hate this crap. What you do is you put your email, you sign up, and then every time I go live, you get a link. That's it. I don't do newsletters or goddamn pledge drives or anything. It's just for giving you notifications. And when I publish articles, then from time to time, then that's also on Substack. But let me just give you the link. It's Richard Medhurst, richardmedhurst.substack.com. It looks like this. There you go. Very simple. Very simple. It's literally one box. Type your email and hit subscribe. I don't want your name. I don't need your name. I don't need any other information whatsoever. I don't care about having your information. It's just so you guys get a notification when I go live, period. There are over 2,000 of you who are on the list, so I appreciate that. And the rest of you, if you want to get it from YouTube, then please hit the bell icon. And if you're new here, thanks for subscribing. Thank you guys very much. That's it for me for today. Again, if you want to support the channel, there's PayPal, Patreon, there's a million things, and I'll put all the links now in the chat and the description. Thank you guys for tuning in. Take care. Ma salame. Bye-bye.
A is for
all men and women created by you know the thing.
B is for
I'm beginning to see why your wife left you.
C is for
Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
D is for
Don't worry, I'm so serious. Children, I love to hear them.
E is for
Excuse to walk by the dealer and say, no, I'm not going to be a mule. I got something to do. I got to go do boom, boom, boom.
F is for
Time friend, and she's a friend. She's been my friend in and out of public life.
G is for
Go to Joe 30330.
H is for
Hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down.
I is for
I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate.
J is for
Just look at the record.
I have President Biden, Vice President Biden.
Well, I tell you what, if you look at my record and you still doubt about my commitment, then you should vote for somebody else.
K is for
Kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
L is for
The lion, dog, face, pony soldier.
M is for
Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone. Make sure the kids hear work.
N is for
NATO.
O is for
The only African-American woman that's ever been elected to the United States Senate.
P is for
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
R is for
Rest her soul, and although your mom's still alive.
S is for
Send a text to the word united.
T is for
Truth over facts.
U is for
Union workers, the UAW took incredible cuts in their future.
V is for
I'll vote for somebody else.
All right, thanks so much.
W is for
Wait, you're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay.
X is for
Xi Jinping.
Y is for
And you ain't black.
Z is for
You sleeping? In our country has been classified as essential. So this is an issue.
By the way, this is my little sister Valerie, and I'm Jill's husband. Oh no, this is you switched on me. This is my wife. This is my sister. They switched on me.
So you have another terrorist attack in Ukraine. This time it's the Kakhovka Dam. And the first thing the media do is blame the Russians. So let's see why the Russians would do it. They control the dam. They control the region. They need the dam to funnel water to Crimea, which is also under Russian control. They literally have zero motive. There is no motive. You know, the Washington Post in December published an article showing how Ukraine targeted this dam using American missiles, using the HIMARS system. They actually fired a missile at this dam to test if they could flood areas. Sound familiar? This is the same thing that we saw with the Nord Stream pipeline attacks, right? The first thing the press do is let's go and blame Russia. And now, almost a year later, the Washington Post finally admits that Ukraine, not Russia, Ukraine blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. This is something that I, myself, and others have been saying since the very beginning. Anyone with half a brain knew that it was not Russia. Russia would not blow up their own pipeline. But, this was dismissed as a crackpot conspiracy theory that NATO would maybe do this, or Ukraine. No, that's Russian propaganda. And another example, the Nazi patches. This week, the New York Times also finally admit that Ukrainian soldiers en masse are wearing Nazi patches to the point that Western journalists have to ask them to hide the patches before they take photos of them. I mean, this is despicable on another level. And then later they claim that these are authentic photos. This is not journalism. This is curated propaganda. So are the New York Times and Washington Post doing propaganda now, right? They're doing Russian disinformation. These people are not doing journalism, all right? You guys are a year late. Only publishing the truth when nobody cares anymore, that's not journalism, okay? They are the ones doing disinformation. They are the ones doing propaganda. And these acts of state terrorism, blowing up pipelines and dams, European leaders say literally absolutely nothing. And all they do is give more money and more weapons to an army where men are wearing Nazi patches and blowing up our infrastructure. So what's the conclusion? Always ask yourself, who stands to gain? Whether we're talking about the Crimea Bridge, Nord Stream pipelines, or the Kakhovka Dam like today, always ask yourself who stands to benefit, and you'll find the answer, you'll find the truth. So everyone's talking about how Donald Trump has been indicted under the Espionage Act. But what a lot of people don't understand is that the Espionage Act is a law that has always been used in the United States as a political tool to silence opponents. It was crafted in 1917, so during World War I, and one of its most famous victims was Eugene Debs. He was given 10 years in prison and stripped of his citizenship because he gave an anti-war speech. Ellsberg, Manning, Kiriakos, Snowden, they were all charged under the Espionage Act as well, and none afforded a public interest defense. Yet another reason why the Espionage Act is a political tool to silence whistleblowers, quite literally, even in court. Even worse, it's also being used to threaten Julian Assange, a publisher, with almost 200 years in prison. So many people are upset about Trump putting classified documents in the bathroom. I wonder if they care just as much about freedom of speech and press freedoms. Trump definitely put America's national security at risk, not for bringing home documents, but assassinating Soleimani, the equivalent of Iran's defense minister. How come Trump's critics never attack him for actual crimes, like putting illegal sanctions on millions of people or stealing oil from Syria?
We're keeping the oil. We have the oil. The oil is secure. We left troops behind only for the oil.
If you love Ukraine, if you care about Ukraine, depleted uranium is the last thing in the world that you would tell them to use. If you look at what the United States have done, everywhere they've used depleted uranium, it's like dropping a nuclear bomb, and actually worse in other ways. Just to give you an example, in Fallujah in Iraq, guess what? 10, 20 years later, there are people in Fallujah who are being born with cancer. And it's so bad that you have higher rates of birth defects and congenital heart disease in Fallujah than you do in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. In Nagasaki and Hiroshima, you knew that there was a nuclear explosion and you had to get the hell away from there if you could. The thing is, the people in Iraq didn't know what the Americans had put in the tank shells. They dropped so much white phosphorus, they used so much depleted uranium. The people living there have no clue about this. The war is bad enough without knowing that, if you live there and you stay there, you're going to get cancer, and your kids are going to be born with these massive nightmarish birth defects. And now they want to bring this literally cancerous thing, depleted uranium, and use it in Ukraine. If you love Ukraine, if you care about Ukraine, depleted uranium is the last thing in the world that you would tell them to use, because guess who's going to suffer from that? The people in Ukraine, right? Like, if their idea is to liberate Ukraine, right? Okay, let's say that they do. Tomorrow morning, Zelensky's gonna emerge victorious over the Donbass and Crimea, and he's gonna go have a nice parade, right? Guess what? All the people returning to their homes, or all the people living there, you're gonna give those people in Ukraine cancer because you use depleted uranium, because this stuff goes in the earth. It seeps into the earth, into the soil, into the water. It's actually worse than a nuke, truly, because people don't even know that it's there. They have no clue that they're living next to things that are going to give them cancer and destroy their DNA and give their children massive birth defects. They don't even know that it's there. It's like a silent killer. They don't care about you, man. They don't care about you. This is bad for the environment, obviously. That doesn't even need stating. And it's bad for human beings, and it's bad for wildlife, for everyone. But it's good for what? It's good if you manufacture it. It's very good. This is explosive. This is mind-blowing. How do we know that it's the Ukrainians who haven't held up their end of the deal, but the Russians have? The deal was that the Russians will pull out of Kiev. At the time, the media that we have here in the West, they were saying, oh, the Russians have failed. Their army sucks. That's actually not at all what happened. The Russians pulled back on purpose and left the capital. They left Kiev because of this peace agreement. Boris Johnson was the prime minister at the time, and he just randomly happens to go and visit Zelensky. And he tells Zelensky, drop out of the peace negotiations, drop out. Zelensky did what Boris Johnson told him to do. Angela Merkel, who is the German chancellor, she says that in the end, the Minsk agreement, it was just a ruse in order to buy time for NATO to arm Ukraine. This means that once again, you cannot take Western leaders and diplomats seriously. The Russians are done talking. This is the conclusion that I draw from this, because they have had it up to here with Ukraine and their backers and guarantors, just playing games with them. So just remember the next time that the media tell you that the Russians walked away from peace talks, that this is a lie. And when they tell you the next time that Russia wanted this war, that this is a lie. Just remember these things.
Some in Iran wanted Iran to go to war with the Taliban. And actually, they were liberals. They were the pro-Western liberals who were saying that we should, go to the defense of the Tajiks, who are Persian speakers, the Hazaras, who are predominantly Shia, and the Uzbeks and others. They together are more than 50%. Taliban is basically Pashtun. They are 40%, roughly 40% of the country. It's sort of ironic because the people who are calling for Iran to wage war against the Taliban, they were totally against the Russians in Ukraine. Their logic is not dissimilar to the logic of the Russians. These people were saying we should go to the support of the Persian speakers. Why not the Russians support Russian speakers? But yeah, that hypocrisy is aside. The Iranian government said, look, we have to keep Afghanistan peaceful, and it's had enough war.
South Africa, China, Brazil, all these countries that are BRICS countries. So they are partners with Russia. They're not condoning Russia. They're actually saying, hey, everybody calm down and let's resolve this. And all you see is media attacking them. They attacked South Africa for proposing diplomacy. They attack Lula for trying to sit down Zelensky. Zelensky makes him wait and then doesn't even show up to the meeting. I mean, how insulting in any context, right? Never mind a goddamn president of the largest country in Latin America. So they try to attack the countries closest to Russia for actually suggesting peace. Maybe South Africa should give some F-16s instead of being a Putin puppet, right? Maybe China should send some F-16s instead of being a Kremlin asset.